Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 56, Lewis versus Nascimento, also known as UFC St. Louis. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network, Mr. Keith Shillan. Keith, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. As we speak right now, we're less than 24 hours removed from the end of UFC 301. That was certainly a card that delivered plenty to talk about, you know, controversy, shocking upsets. It ran the whole gamut. I'm still buzzing a little bit from that one in a way that I'm not always, even after a big pay-per-view event, UFC 300 being an obvious exception, of course. We dive from that right into, at least it's not another Apex card. It's the UFC on the road, and UFC Fight Nights and the ESPN cards on the road, where, you know, it's UFC Austin, UFC Columbus, UFC, you know, Charlotte, whatever. The promotion does seem to put a little more effort into them. They've gone to some effort to put some Midwestern and some specifically St. Louis fighters on this card. The overall quality of the card, it's not approaching pay-per-view card level, but it's definitely a cut above, I think, most of the Apex cards this year. Tell me if I'm crazy. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I give it like a C. I mean, I think it's okay. Like the main event is not the sexiest main event. I mean, Derek Lewis is what he is. At one point, he was a big star and funny, and obviously he's a fan favorite, and he's got a lot of accolades with all the knockouts and stuff he has. But the shyness kind of ran off him. Like we all know what he is at this point. He's never going to challenge for a title again, or he's never going to be a threat for the title again. So it's, they put him in fun matchups. I would have rather had this be a co-main event and have like a bigger main event. So that's kind of why I'd give it like a C. But yeah, overall the cards are great. Being in front of a crowd to me is going to score more points. The Apex is terrible.
The Apex is absolutely terrible.
You make it seem small to me. You make it seem small.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it's not just us spoiled, jaded media members saying it. More and more, you have actual fighters saying, I'm sick of fighting at the Apex.
Yeah. So if you guys watched the recap show, we ended a little after 3 a.m. this morning. I had to be at a girls softball game at 9. I had to be there at 8 a.m. The game started at 9. Okay. It was cold. It was kind of drizzly. It was, I don't know, high 40s, 48, 40. Like it was a miserable day. There shouldn't be more people at a girls 14U. Mind you, it was travel season, but it's still like the scrimmage part of the travel season. The games don't even really matter. There shouldn't be more people at that than at the premier mixed martial art organization in the world's event. It just shouldn't happen.
It shouldn't happen. I completely agree. And I don't want to go too far down this tangent, but the new policy the UFC announced just a couple weeks ago, where fighters' families are going to be allowed to come see them at the Apex, but literally just for their fight. So your folks get to see your fight, and then they usher them out so the next two fighters' families can come in. Like, if you're a fighter that's from Brazil, hell, if you're from Virginia, if you're from South Texas, you're going to travel to Las Vegas to get into the Apex for 20 minutes and then go back home. That sucks. And there are a good number of fighters that they have 4 or 5 fights in the UFC and they've only ever fought at the Apex.
Yeah, it sucks. It's terrible.
It's miserable. And I agree with you. I mean, Derek Lewis is the king of Houston, and he will be for as long as he wants to keep fighting, but he's lost 5 of his last 7 fights. In that arena, it's not going to matter. St. Louis is going to go bananas for that guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then in the co-main event, you have Joaquin Buckley, who's probably St. Louis's best fighter right now. It's gonna be a live card, and it's gonna feel bigger. Like you said, the Apex makes the sport feel smaller. This C card, from the crowd response in the arena, you'd think you were watching, one of the best cards of the year, and that's what makes it fun.
Yeah. So I wish that one of the media members would ask Dana, like they beat around the bush, but they don't specifically ask them, like, hey, you constantly say you want to go to this place and this place and this place. Wouldn't it be easier if you stop having cards at the Apex? Like, when are you going to go full-time on the road? And ask that. I promised the listeners, I don't get to go to a lot of UFC events. I mean, I kind of just cover the Northeast here. I guess technically I probably could have pushed for Newark, but it's tough. It's middle of like my daughter's travel softball season and everything, and I coach. But if I get that chance and no one's asked that, I'm gonna directly ask Dana like that. I promise you guys that.
All right, deal. If I'm the next one of us to cover one, they come down here to Texas next, I'll ask.
I mean, he probably would give like a bullshit answer, but at least someone will ask. Like the people who are there every week, why have they not asked is
depending on his mood, he'll either give kind of a bluff non-answer, or he'll like snap at us and try to like rile up the UFC stands against us. I don't give a shit either way.
I don't either.
Yeah. I mean, Sherdog lost its credential for like 10 years and we were just fine. So,
and then the Shillan Duffy show gets it kicked out again. Next time we do the Shillan Duffy show. So the Shillan Duffy show, and it's like, it will be see some other website, not presented by Sherdog.com.
Back on the Loudmouth MMA podcast network.
Yeah, exactly. So we are not I'm not an anti-Dana White person.
No.
Like there's obviously some things like I don't like him hitting his wife and stuff like that, but I would say we're pretty fair and balanced. Like I think he's done wonderful things for sports. I think he does bad things. We're not like some of the writers at Bloody Elbow that would just wouldn't constantly stop tweeting negative things about without him. But in this case, when it comes to the Apex, to me, it's a terrible take.
Yeah, it's not great for the sport.
So let's talk about the positive. I'm really happy that they're going to be in arena in St. Louis.
Yes.
Hope the Bears are flying. I hope, and then the post-fight interviews make it so much more exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And being in like there's nothing worse than Joe Martinez being like, make some noise if you are ready. And there's like 4 people.
Ooh,
yeah.
It sounds like you're in a junior high talent show, or some fighter third on the card wins his fight, gets a knockout, and he's like, Dana, give me 50 G's, and then realize that Dana's not even there.
Yeah.
All right, enough ragging on this. Any general? Well, here, let me ask you my usual question.
Okay.
Off of a win, who on this card is closest to a title shot?
Okay, let me see.
And usually I say outside of the main event, but I'll include the main event here because neither Lewis nor Nascimento is that close, even if they win. So on this whole card, I mean, I've got a take.
I was looking for that like women's fight because that's the shallow division is always the closest.
Yep. But
I don't know.
I'll give you mine. Menefield Ulberg winner is the closest.
That's what I was leaning with.
Like Ulberg's won like 5 in a row. Menefield is like a 5-fight unbeaten streak or something like that.
Yeah, I could see Derek Lewis but with like a side note, it's Aspinall defending his interim title. You know, he's supposed to fight Cyril Gone has to pull out, and they just call the old reliable Derek Lewis kind of thing. I could see that I think would be like the most likely.
Yeah.
Some guys that are nice streaks, they're just in the wrong division. Like Buckley's just in the wrong division. It's a great division for him, like talent wise, but it's just the wrong division to make. I mean, like poor Bilal Muhammad.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. And we'll talk about that more when we get to his fight, but it's sad and ironic. The dropping from 185 to 170 has flipped a switch for him competitively, but now he's doing it in a division where it's just much, much harder. If he had stayed in middleweight, just winning 2, losing 1, winning 2, losing 1, he might actually have backed into a title shot more easily than if he just stays at welterweight and keeps wrecking people, like winning 4 and losing 1. So I agree.
Yeah, he'd just be giving up a foot to everybody in height.
Which fight on this card are you most excited to see?
I think that one. I think Buckley's fight.
Buckley and Ruzaboyev in his first shot at 170. Yeah, I don't hate that at all.
I think that one. I mean, there's a couple, and I'm in, and I apologize if I say his wrong. I'm excited to see. How do I say his name? Despaigne again.
Robelis Despaigne.
Yeah, just because, dude, honestly, that might be the answer. Of who's closest to a title shot. I'm excited to see him just because of everything that goes along with him. Because he's such a exciting addition to the heavyweight division.
Terrifying addition to the heavyweight division. I'm not mad at that at all. And this is one of those cards where more than matchups I'm excited for. There are individual fighters I'm excited to see do their thing, and probably none more than Robelis Despaigne.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm excited to see Waldo Acosta, Cortez.
Well, I don't think you'll have to see him for very long, but we'll talk about that fight when we get to it. Shall we dig into these prelims?
Yeah.
All right. First up at UFC St. Louis is a women's flyweight matchup between JJ Aldrich and Veronica Hardy. Aldrich, the 31-year-old Colorado native, is 13-6 overall. She's 9-5 in the UFC. She's 6-4 since moving up to flyweight. She joined the UFC as a strawweight standout, moved up to flyweight, where she again is 6-4 and is on a 2-fight win streak. Those being a knockout of Na Liang at UFC Fight Night Holloway versus Korean Zombie last August, and then a unanimous decision win over Montana De La Rosa in October at UFC Fight Night Dawson versus Green. She's back in the cage for the first time in about 9 months, and she'll be facing Hardy. The 28-year-old Venezuelan by way of France is 8-4-1 overall. She's 3-4 in the UFC, which does not sound that impressive, but worth noting that she came back last year, in fact, just a little over a year ago after 3 years off, and has looked like a completely different fighter since. She fought twice last year, taking a dominant decision over Juliana Miller in March, and then coming back in December and taking a split decision over Jamie Lynn Horth at UFC on ESPN, Dariush versus Sarukian. So the former Ms. Macedo, now Mrs. Hardy, will look to make it 3 in a row. Keith, there are a number of close lines on this card. In fact, on the whole 13-fight card, I think there are only 3 fighters that are a 2-1 favorite or greater. So I will quiz you on some of these lines.
That's good.
No, completely agree. We just finished a card where there were 3 4-1 favorites or greater. And one of those favorites slipped on a banana peel. But in this fight, your favorite is -145, your underdog +120. Who are they?
That's tough. I mean, I think the line should be even closer, but I mean, it's a close line. I'll go Hardy, maybe the favorite.
Correct. Veronica Hardy -145, JJ Aldrich +120. Tell me who you think wins this one and how the fight goes.
The first thing that stands out to me is why is this card the opener? Both these girls are on a 2-fight winning streak, and not the deepest division. I'm not saying they're close to a title shot or anything like that, but they're close to being ranked. I just think this fight should. I'm not saying it should be on the main card, but I think it should be 2 or 3 spots above. I always think about put down a bout order. If the main event is the most marketable, and then you kind of trickle down from there. This one, when you added the division, the marketability, everything. To me, this isn't the least marketable fight, because the way I think about it is, I know there's an argument you want an exciting fight to kind of get the people to want to be in their seats, but I think about it more of if I'm going to show up late, if I have something going on, whatever it is, I could get there with a second, third, fourth fight. I want the least one I'm interested in be the first one fight, right?
Yeah, and if the UFC is looking to open the curtain with a banger, this will probably be a pretty lively fight, but
yeah,
I'm sure it's minus money to go to decision, because neither woman is a super venomous finisher. It's not really a finisher's division. If you just want to see someone get their ass knocked out, open up, or if you wanted to fight that's probably not going to make it to the final horn, open it up with Hooper versus Borshchev, or Gooden versus Jousset. Yeah,
exactly. Totally. Exactly. Into the action of this one, I think it's a very competitive fight. I actually like both girls a lot. I mean, they're on a winning streak. JJ Aldrich is someone that I've kind of been much higher on than I think a lot of people have been. I think what stands out to me, she's got that pale skin. She's, you're in the bright lights of St. Louis. She could get like a sunburn from the lights in the arena. Like, that's how pale she is.
They might be handing out disposable dark glasses in the arena, like you're in a 3D movie or something, just so you don't get the Aldrich glare on you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to talk shit. Like, I'm the same boat. So
you both got that Irish tan. Yeah.
Yeah. She doesn't look like an athlete. She looks like she'd be working the front desk at a hotel or something. Like, that's what she looks like. That said, she's more athletic than I originally credited her with. she's a good striker. She's a southpaw, some good boxing, bit of a point fighter. Doesn't have the most power, but she likes to stick and move. She cuts angles really well to kind of keep her opponents guessing. She sets up her shots well with feints. Like she understands the strategic part of her striking. She draws out counterattacks well with the feints. Great 1-2s down the pipe. I'd say pretty fast hand. Not the biggest hitter, but not very good in the clinch. Like Ariel Lipski beat her up there, going way back. Sabina Mazza beat her up there, but she's a better outside wrestler than I originally thought. Like she's an underrated offensive and defensive wrestler. I mean, I go back to like Courtney Casey fight. Like when I go back to strategy, she was looking for takedowns against Courtney Casey. No, she'll struggle to chain wrestle together because that's not normally her thing. She's one of the ones she needs to learn how to, change a double to a single or then go back, take a single to a double and back trips. She also was really bad luck when she was headlocked twice by Ni Liang, which that regardless of how high she goes up by rankings and how long of a streak, she could go on a 10-fight streak. That note stayed in my notes for a while. Veronica Hardy, you're absolutely right. I mean, she's in the right weight class now. She looks like a much different fighter than when she left. She's a stick and move fighter, moves a lot, trying to get her opponents to kind of chase her, and she counters attacks. She dodges away from counters really well. She's got quick hands, though she can be a little wild and kind of swing wildly. I like her jab. I like that she's added kicks really well into her punching combinations. She got really good high kick. She comes from a Taekwondo style. You see that like kind of Holly Holm push kick. She likes that. She'll throw some spinning attacks. Underrated power. She hits harder than I expected. She's hurt her last two opponents with the striking. Still the issue is her not much of an offensive grappler. She's still a little weaker defensive wrestler. If she's taken down, she struggles to back to her feet. Though she did hit an armbar on Poliana Viana a while back. This is a really good matchup. I've really flip-flopped on this one. I like both of them a lot. I think they're both really good strikers. I give Aldrich the edge in the boxing, but I give Hardy the edge in the speed and in the range kicking. She's also probably the harder hitter. Like I said, I've flip-flopped. Even now when I'm making the pick, I don't feel confident. Aldrich will occasionally look for a takedown. And that just adds another avenue of victory for her. And that's like, I'm splitting hairs, but that's what I'm going to go with. I think both will have moments, but if Aldrich can add some takedowns, that could win her close rounds. I'll go with that upset right away. I'll give Aldrich by split decision.
Buckle up, Shillan and Duffy listeners, because I think there are going to be quite a few upset calls on the night. There are a lot of very close lines on this card, and I know that spoiler, 13-fight card, I think I'm probably picking 5 or 6 upsets. Keith is coming out of the gate hot, and this is one that we agree on. First of all, we both kind of talked about whether this was the most appropriate fight to open the card, but that's nothing to do with these two women because they're both good flyweights, and they're both women that I've definitely underestimated. You mentioned that you've been higher on Aldrich than some people. Yeah, you've been higher on Aldrich than the person that you talk to for 6 hours a week about MMA. I was really slow in getting on the Aldrich train, and really just laziness on my part because she has a low-key personality. I underestimated kind of how competitive and nasty she is because she has just sort of a average physique for a professional fighter. I underestimated how athletic she is and how hard she hits. I've come around on that. And she's a good striker with underrated / underused wrestling. Hardy, the problems that I had, they're more quantifiable. Her first run in the UFC, she was really young and she was a very undersized bantamweight for a lot of it. I mean, she got mashed by Ashley Evans Smith. Even at the time, she was a more skilled fighter than Ashley Evans Smith. Just Smith looked 2 weight classes bigger than her. Since she's been back, it's a whole different thing. The overall skill set is the same, but the power is suddenly there. And as you are always quick to mention on these previews, she's coming into the power years now. She was 21, 22, 23 the first time around fighting bantamweights. Now she's 28 and fighting flyweights. And while she doesn't have walk-off power, really, almost nobody does at women's flyweight, she has stinging power. Everything she lands, especially her hands, just you can see women shake it off. You can see them stop in their tracks. The Mike Tyson, everyone's got a game plan until they got punched in the mouth thing. Like, women adjust to her power when she starts hitting them. Like, Juliana Miller knew going into their fight that her best bet was to get the fight to the ground. She presumably was going to have an advantage on the ground, but after taking a couple shots from Hardy, she just didn't really seem to want it. Here, I think Aldrich is going to have a bit of a size advantage. Ironic, since Aldrich is the one that came up from strawweight around the same time that Hardy was fighting or was dropping from bantamweight, but Aldrich is going to be a little bigger. I think the southpaw thing will, I mean, not give Hardy problems. Hardy's a very good striker herself, but just give Hardy a different look that doesn't let her get untracked quite as quickly and easily as she's used to. If Aldrich turns to her wrestling, which I expect she will, she's a pretty smart fighter. I agree with you that that's something that can allow her to maybe win close rounds, find a safety valve if she is getting stuff she doesn't like from Hardy on the feet. And even the threat of it, you know, can help her own striking get untracked. Give me Aldrich in a competitive decision here as well in a fun card opener. Welterweights take the cage next in St. Louis as Jared Gooden faces off against Kevin Jousset. Gooden, the 30-year-old Atlanta native, is 23-9 overall. He is 2-4 in the UFC across 2 different stints with the promotion. He's 1-1 since returning to the promotion about a year ago. He came back to the UFC last March, dropping a unanimous decision to Carlston Harris, then came back in December and tapped out Wellington Turman in the second round. So he will look to make it 2 wins in a row, edge closer to 500 overall in the octagon. He will need to get past Jousset to do it. 31-year-old New Zealander is 10-2 overall. He is 2-0 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Hex Fight Series welterweight champ. He fought twice last year. Well, he fought 4 times last year. He fought twice last year in the UFC, debuted in September, and tapped out Kiefer Crosby with a rear naked choke late in the first round, came back on a fairly quick turnaround 3 months later in December and took a unanimous decision over Song Kanan. So he's looking to make it 3 in a row. I believe it would make his overall win streak something like 7 fights. He is favored to do so. Jousset is minus 220, Gooden plus 180. I like when Gooden's around in the UFC. I think his fights are generally fun. I think there's a hard ceiling on how good he can be. He is a huge welterweight, like just a gigantic guy for the division in a lot of the same way Randy Brown is. Like, his upper body, like, not only is he like ridiculously tall for the division, but he's got a big upper body, like broad shoulders, muscle on his arms, that kind of, the way he crams that into a welterweight's frame is by having long, kind of skinny legs. He's a big dude. Not a terribly good athlete, at least by comparison to the welterweights that he faces. Just, you know, he's a little bit plodding, hard hitter, you know, a pretty good repertoire of strikes, but has some defensive liabilities that I'm sure you'll be able to go over in better detail than me. His ground game is a bit of a deficiency as well. Just, I see Jousset, who's not a small welterweight either, being better than him pretty much everywhere, and just a faster, just a faster athlete as well. Gooden might be the harder hitter on like a single shot for single shot basis, but I just don't think it's going to come down to that. Just because Jousset is better at throwing in combination, throws a better diversity of strikes, and is better defensively. So even if Gooden punches the bag at the Dave & Buster's and gets a higher number, Jousset is the guy more likely to get significant strikes onto Gooden's chin and onto his body. Gooden, even when overmatched, has been extremely tough. I'm going to say this one makes it to the final horn, but Jousset just kind of puts a beating on him. like kicks him to the legs and body, tags him with punches upstairs. I think it's fairly unlikely that this fight goes to the ground unless somebody shoots a desperation takedown or is really badly hurt. But if it goes there, I think Jousset may have the advantage there as well. Give me Jousset by a pretty one-sided decision in a fight contested mostly on the feet.
Yeah, this is like a fight that I think could open the card instead of the females there. Yeah, I mean, Gooden is what he is at this point in his career. I agree that he can be exciting, but he's a card filler. That's what he is. He is a large guy. I'll give that. His boxing, he doesn't have many huge weaknesses, but nothing that really jumps out to you. He's got boxing, not a lot of tells, and is pretty technically sound. Kind of just touches until there's an opening. He has good power, especially when he can get into his range. He'll work to the body. He'll throw the lead uppercut, like that naked uppercut, which I don't like, but still nothing too major. Doesn't really handle pressure well. He wants to be the guy kind of bullying, moving forward. He drops his hands a little bit. Actually, what I say is, I should have said nothing jumps out to you. There is the big weakness is his defense. Like, he doesn't move his head at all, and he keeps his hands down. Like, he forgets about defense. He will look for a takedown, but he's definitely not I wouldn't say he's a great offensive wrestler. Not the best defensive wrestler. Struggles to get up on the bottom. He did catch Wellington Turman, which was nice. I am a little worried about his chin, though. Even in that fight, Turman, he hurt him a bunch of times. Jousset, we talk about Gooden being large. I mean, Jousset was like a massive guy. He might be the biggest welterweight I've ever seen. He's long and lengthy, little flat-footed, a little stiff. But that was what I was saying coming into the UFC. But he looked fantastic against San Kanan. Looked like a completely different fighter. Good out. I mean, it's still a San Kanan. Take that for what it's worth, but good output, tight boxing, straight shots, long jab. He was setting his shots well with feints. He also lacks head movement. He's been cracked a lot, and he keeps his chin high in the air. He kind of has that tall man's defense. But the dude is durable. I mean, I've seen him get hit with some big shots, and he's got a hell of a beard on him. He just keeps moving forward, and it doesn't seem to affect him. Big kicking game, hard leg kicks, really quick high kick, can get up there super easy because of his size. Uses his size really well in the clinch. Very physically strong guy. Likes to Muay Thai plum clinch. Got some good dirty boxing. I like that he looks for elbows inside and knees inside the clinch. He's got a judo black belt background, so he can get some takedowns from the clinch. But he also will shoot. Strong top game. I've seen him stall on top, but he did get a quick sub on Kiefer Crosby. Take that again, what it's worth. It's Kiefer Crosby. But when he lets his ground and pound go, I mean, he's big, so he's kind of has that like Kenny Njoku, Johnny Walker type thing where you just kind of get those long arms and long legs. It's kind of hard to stop coming in. But he's not the best defensive wrestler. I'm with you. I like Jousset here. He's bigger. He's got better volume. He's stronger. He's probably the better grappler. The issue is the defense. If suddenly his chin can't handle it, that's Gooden's best advantage. Maybe he lands a big shot and puts him out. I really see that as the only avenue of victory, especially the deeper the fight goes. I think the volume of Jousset will take over. I'm with you. Gooden's tough, so I think he goes the distance. Give me Jousset by decision.
Men's flyweights take the cage next as Charles Johnson takes on Jake Hadley. Johnson, the 33-year-old St. Louis native, hometown fighter, is 14-6 overall. He's 3-4 since joining the UFC as an LFA flyweight standout. He did win his last time out, took a unanimous decision over Azat Maksum at UFC Fight Night Dolidze versus Imavov back in February. That allowed him to bounce back from a 3-fight losing streak to close out last year. So he's looking to make it 2 in a row, get back to 500 in the UFC. He will do it he will attempt to do it at the expense of Hadley. 27-year-old Birmingham, England native is 10-2 overall. He's 2-2 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series as a then undefeated prospect. He lost his last time out, dropped a unanimous decision to Cody Durden. That snapped a 2-fight win streak for him over Carlos Candelario and Malcolm Gordon. So he's looking to get back in the win column, looking to get back over 500 in the UFC. Your favorite in this fight, Keith, is -170. Your underdog is +140. Who are they?
I'll say Hadley is a favorite.
You're correct. Hadley is -170. Johnson +140. I'm gonna flip this one to you for the pick first, but first I want to get something out of the way that I should have during the intro. One thing that this card definitely has to recommend it is this might be one of low key the UFC's all-time cards for people with freakish physiques. Like, yes, Sean Woodson is the most weirdly built fighter on this card. He always will be every time he fights. Yeah. But for once, there's some competition around. You got Charles Johnson, the like 5'10" flyweight. We got Trey Waters, the 6'4".
Oh my God.
Or 6'4", 6'5".
He just keeps growing.
Yeah. I got Chase Hooper. Yeah.
In fairness, like, Hooper could still be so young he is. He could still be growing.
And on the flip side, you got Tecia Pennington, one of the shortest women in the UFC. I feel like on this card,
and her opponent.
And her opponent, Tabatha Ricci. And this card has 26 fighters. I feel like about 10 of them, if you just line them up again, like in silhouette, I could identify them. Like, that's Derek Lewis. That's Alex Caceres. You can tell by the hair. That's definitely Sean Woodson. That's Robelis Despaigne. That's Chase Hooper. That's definitely Tecia Pennington.
Yeah, like, you just had a grainy like security video that I have to look at all the time. You just pick them out easily.
Yeah, it's like having said that, and I mean, always a place in my heart for Charles Johnson. It's just so rare you see a black dude with a mullet. More power to him for embracing the cross culture.
Justin Ledet would be proud.
Yes, Houston's own. Anyway, so we got. It's hard to call Johnson a prospect, but he's hanging in there. Maybe still hasn't shown the best he can do here. Hadley still looking to regain some of that shine that he had when he joined the UFC. Who gets it done here, and what does it look like?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, when you were doing your intro, a lot of times please don't take this personal. A lot of times I'm like shuffling my notes and kind of figure out who I want to start with and how I want to say things. And you mentioned from St. Louis, and suddenly I had a scare that I was mixing Jake Hadley. I thought you said Hadley was from St. Louis, and I had this like scare that I'm like, wait a minute, I thought Hadley was that guy from Britain, and I thought I had I did notes on the wrong person, And then I'm like, question was it? Oh, his name's not Jake Hadley. Is it like Jake Hansen? And I'm like, and then I'm like, oh, it's Charles Johnson. It's from St. Louis. Yeah. I didn't realize that he was from St. Louis. Hadley was like a good addition to the UFC. He was a guy that had like a lot of buzz. Anybody coming from the UK that has a kind of bigger personality kind of gets that. But he can fight. The guy's a southpaw. He's got really good volume. He presses the action kind of this nonstop pace, constantly taking ground, cutting off the cage, trapping his opponents. Very technical in that sense. Like his boxing is good jab, a lot of variety in striking, constantly mixing up the attacks, mixing up the combinations. I love that he focused so much on the body work. It's like something that he such a big part of his game. Defense, he has this. He's like the weirdest defense. He has this like weird pillaring where he bends his right arm across his body, kind of like I don't know. I mean, is it like a Philly shell, but from like a UK version that I don't know about.
The Birmingham shell. I
don't know, but it can break his opponent's punches coming out because he kind of has his elbow there, but it also leaves him wide open for body shots because he kind of keeps it high like this. He does also back straight up on the center line when he's not the one pressed forward. Good kicking game. Turns his hips over really well, so he really crushes, especially to the body from the southpaw stance against an orthodox fighter. I'd say he's a better offensive wrestler than I thought. Good top game. I always knew he was a good grappler. I just meant like his overall wrestling, I should say. He looks to advance position. The problem is and this happens a lot from guys who don't come from a wrestling background. They kind of have to focus. When you're not in the wrestling room working on it, you kind of have to focus on one aspect. And the defensive wrestling has kind of taken. He's a weak defensive wrestler. But he's super flexible. He gets to fight around. He can toss up submissions, chain submissions together. I mean, go back to like his fight against Mitch Raposa, who's I dog people for knowing him, but I think Mitch Raposa is a pretty solid prospect.
I think he's the best. I'm glad you mentioned that because I think he might be the best prospect in that weight range in New England right now.
Could be. Yeah. I mean, it's not saying much, but yeah. So, but he had a Google Plata on Mitch. He was going almost hit a Google Plata on Mitch Raposo. So the problem is he does struggle to get up to the bottom because he plays that jiu-jitsu game. I go back to like the Alan Nesmith, but Alan Nesmith is a really good prospect himself. But he really struggled to get off the bottom. Charles Johnson, he's a good athlete. He moves well. He's elusive, constantly darting back and forth between stances, kind of get you guessing. Kickboxer on the feet, kind of a counter striker, slip and rip guy. He does roll with punches, which I'm not crazy about, and his rolling, doesn't bode well with pressure. Like I go back to it's been a while ago, but when he fought against Zumagulov, he really hated the pressure from Zumagulov. I like that he also works the body. Big thing about him, like he first came to the UFC. I think about a striker. He's more of a wrestler. He wrestles a lot. He gets a lot of takedowns. The problem is he's also one of these guys that doesn't come from wrestling backgrounds. He's a good offensive wrestler. He's a terrible defensive wrestler. And he's a guy, he'll get back to his feet, but he'll give up his back and stuff to get up to his feet, which is concerning. I like Hardy's offensive tools. I hate his defensive tools, especially his defensive wrestling. Johnson could turn this into a wrestling match and win. Like he has no problem doing that. Being that he's from St. Louis, I didn't factor that in. It makes me a little less confident in my pick, which obviously I'm going with Hadley. I think Hadley will do enough in the grappling if he's taken down to challenge Johnson, kind of create a scramble, maybe put Johnson in some trouble. I think once he gets to the feet, Hadley's going to have his way. I think he's quicker. I think he's kind of coming into his own, especially with his kicks and his clean boxing. Johnson's tough. He might hurt him a little bit, but I don't think he takes him out. Give me Hadley by decision.
Yeah, there's upset potential here. You mentioned Hadley has some deficiencies in terms like defensively has some deficiencies. Some of them are skill deficiencies that you outlined, head movement, backing straight up. Others are just the natural product of how aggressive his offensive style is and kind of how unorthodox it is at times. And it's unless he really changes his approach, I think it's going to define his ceiling at 125. I mean, 125 is full of aggressive guys with diverse offensive tools, and most of them, it's a very live by the sword, die by the sword type division. Like as skilled as all the guys are, there are very few of them that are super defensively sound. Johnson could catch Hadley, but like Johnson has good snap on his strikes. He has that just like long limbed Tommy Hearns type power where even punches where it doesn't look like he's swinging hard, just have snap on him. But I don't think it's enough to really make Hadley pay for a mistake. And it'll get interesting if Johnson turns to his wrestling early, and if he does, if he's smart, he will. But I'm with you. I think Hadley takes this one. I think it could stand to be even closer than the lines are, and Hadley's only like minus 170. But I'm leaning Hadley here as well, much to the disappointment of the hometown crowd. Give me Jake Hadley by decision too. Welterweights are up again as Billy Goff faces Trey Waters. Goff, the 25-year-old Connecticut native, is 9-2 overall. He's 1-0 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He's on a 7-fight win streak overall. He made his UFC debut last August at UFC Fight Night Holloway versus Korean Zombie, where he knocked out Yusaku Kinoshita in the first round. That spectacular debut came almost a full year after his appearance on the Contender Series. It hasn't taken him a full year to get back in the cage, but it has taken him about 9 months. He'll look to make up for lost time by taking it out on Waters. Waters, 29-year-old Floridian, 8-1 overall, also 1-0 in the UFC. He also fought on season 6 of the Contender Series. He actually lost, got tapped out by Gabriel Bonfim. Not Ismail that just barely fought, by Gabriel Bonfim. He went and won one fight in LFA, then got the call up to fight Josh Quinlan last April at UFC on ESPN, Song versus Simone, where he won a unanimous decision. It's taken him a full year to get back into the cage. And he is favored to get it done here. Waters is -170, Goff plus 140. Speaking of promising prospects from New England, like, I no longer have the time to watch as much regional MMA as I did 10 years ago when I was just an obsessive fan, or even 5 years ago when I was at Sherdog, but my duties were much different than they are now. But Goff is a guy that's been on my radar, mostly as, you know, I've just seen him get past some of the other guys that I thought were some of the more solid prospects in New England in his weight range. Just like, you know, people like Gary Boletto, Sean Lally, like guys that I thought might end up on the Contender Series. Yeah, guys that I thought might end up on the Contender Series themselves, and just watching Goff really run right through him, especially in the case of Gary Boletto Jr., just crushed him.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and still just 25 years old, which takes a little of the sting off the fact that he seems to have regressed into this like basically once a year fighter since getting the call from the Contender Series. But I do see upside in the guy. He's not huge, and well, I mean, nobody's going to look huge next to Waters, but a good size 170 pounder, aggressive striker with good power, and I'd say a developing ground game. It's not his best skill set, and more importantly, it's not his instinct. Like I'll talk on these previews a lot about, okay, this is what this fighter knows how to do well, and then this is what their instincts actually make them do when the punches start flying. Goff is a guy that is coming along and becoming more well-rounded, even while piling up this win streak, and that's a good place to be in. Waters, obviously, the thing that stands out about him is that he's listed at 6'5", and we've talked before about how we know that weights are accurate. I mean, a few weird exceptions aside, we know that weights are accurate because the guys are getting weighed the day before their fights everywhere from the smallest regional promotion all the way up to the UFC. They never get measured for height. They don't. Like, half the time when someone comes to the UFC, they told their promotion 8 years ago how tall they were. That got passed to the next promotion. That got passed to Tough or Contender Series. That got passed to the UFC, and nobody ever actually took a tape measure to the guy. It's how Shane Carwin shrank from like 6'5" to 6'3" to 6'1", you know, in the space. No, he literally did.
Where's Dev at? Get Dev. Come on, dude. Get this Dev business going.
I mean, Dev said that he accepted the job. I mean, he named a bunch of attractive female fighters as the reason he was raring to go. So his heart may not really be in it to go, you know, down to Florida and measure Trey Waters, but come on, man, we got to give equal treatment. But Waters, he may actually be 6'5". He is absolutely huge. He does not quite have the reach on his arms that you would expect. Like, he's not 6'5" in the way that Johnny Walker or Ryan Spann is, where it looks like they could grab both sides of the octagon at the same time and just kind of, you know, pull on the bars. But he is huge. His size creates matchup problems. It's going to create matchup problems for every welterweight he ever fights, even other ones that are considered big. But at this point in his development, he actually doesn't put it to his best possible use. Like, he knows in his mind that he's best served fighting an out game, but thus far, he doesn't quite have the athleticism to force that on people, and he hasn't shown an ability to consistently use the kind of inside weapons that other tall but not super fast fighters develop to make that work. I mean, as of right now, this is going to sound like an insulting comparison, but even when he wins, I see kind of like welterweight Stefan Struve, where he's way big, but smaller, faster guys are able to get in and do damage on him. I actually think that's what Goff's going to do. Unless Goff is compromised by, you know, whatever physical ailments have kept him on the shelf for most of the last year and then most of the last year before that. I think he's going to be faster. I think he's a harder hitter on a punch for punch basis. And I think we are going to get a little bit of welterweights, Stefan Struve type action where there are going to be some fun exchanges early on, but Goff is going to get inside and like land an overhand on Waters' chin, and things are going to start rolling downhill from there. Give me Goff by second round KO in a mild upset here.
Yeah, so Billy Goff was a guy that, like, I was at his very first professional fight, and I was actually, I think I was at a couple of his first. I remember being at a Bellator fight too. I think it was second or third fight he was at, and then obviously CES fights. I've seen Ben at a lot of his fights, and he was a guy when he first started. He was just another guy. But you're right. He's continued to improve. He's at that age where he's improving. He's not the greatest athlete, but the dude is freaking tough as nails. I mean, he could take a beat and just keeps bringing it. He's a pressure kickboxer that he beats his opponents by forcing his opponents onto their back foot. Just constant, again, I'll say again, just constant pressure. Great volume. He loves to get in the pocket and just brawl it out. He can be wild. He can overthrow his shots, kind of leave him open the counter, but he's got power. I mean, he has TKO wins over good guys. You mentioned Gary Boletto, Justin Supner was a guy that had, I still think a decent guy, but, was a rising guy for New England. He throws kicks, though he'll throw some naked kicks, so that's an issue. He has a lot of defensive issues, chin high in the air, drops his hands a little bit. He's been hurt so many times because he's just willing to eat one to land some. If he gets inside, strong, dirty boxing, he butches Supner with mean elbows. I wouldn't call him a wrestler by any means, but he can win rounds with some wrestling. If he's taken down, he's hard to hold down. He keeps working. He doesn't have a single submission win, so that's something that concerns me. Trey Waters, I mean, you mentioned it's huge, 6'5", 6'4", 6'5", something like that. Counter striker, not the greatest output. Kind of a very patient striker. Relies on slipping and ripping, which is kind of tough to do when you're a tall guy. He's got quick hands though. I think he hits hard. His walk-off KO in the LFA was really impressive. Good kicking game, mean calf kicks, but he's been hurt a lot. He isn't much of a wrestler. He is a submission threat, though. If he can get the fight to the ground, he's got those long arms and legs. Obviously, if he locks something, it's going to be really hard to get out of. So he's got 3 subs on his record. I think it's a really, really hard fight to pick. Waters has, he's got the height. He's got some power. That's a serious issue. Goff's pressure and volume could easily take over. I think this is a really tough one. I flip-flopped. Technically, Waters is better. And if, I can see him pot shotting and kicking and, just Goff having such a hard time with the range, the natural thing. But Goff is a junkyard dog. I'm not a guy that picks New England fighters often, and I'm not pretending that Goff is special. I think his peak is a mid-range guy. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I hope they get a star. And he's at a young age, so I could be wrong. Goff's just gonna stay in his face, man. I'm with you, man. I everything in me says, dude, this should be an easy pick for Waters. Look how big he is. He can look eye to eye with Sean Woodson. Not many people could say that. I think Goff's gonna make it a brawl, and I think he's gonna take over. I think he's gonna win with volume. I think he might hurt him at some point. I think he's gonna finish him. I'll say Goff by second round TKO.
All right. For those keeping track at home, and if you're not keeping track at home, why the hell are you watching this show? That is 2 unanimous upset picks in the first 4 fights of this card. As I said, buckle up and bet responsibly. We head now to the strawweight division for a clash between Tabatha Ricci and Tecia Pennington. Ricci, the 29-year-old Brazilian, is 9-2 overall. She's 4-2 in the UFC. She's 4-1 at strawweight. She made her debut in the UFC on short notice at flyweight against Mononfiore. About as excusable a loss as they come. She did get knocked out for her efforts. She went on from there to drop to 115 pounds, won 4 fights in a row to become a woman of interest in that division. That streak came to an end in her most recent cage appearance. She fought at UFC 295 last November, where she dropped a split decision to Lupi Godinez. Nonetheless, a fun and competitive fight, but she's looking to get back in the win column here, and she will need to get past the former Miss Torres to do so. Tecia Pennington, 34-year-old Floridian, 13-6 overall. 9-6 since joining the UFC out of Invicta Fighting Championships. She lost her last time out as well. Dropped a split decision to Mackenzie Dern. That was just a little over 2 full years ago at UFC 273. Prior to that, she had been on a 3-fight win streak. So that dynamic remains kind of the same between the two. Obviously, the big difference is that Pennington has been out for 2 full years. That's because she had a baby with her spouse, fellow UFC competitor Raquel Pennington. She's back. She's still just 34, clearly aiming to prove that she has something left to offer the division. Keith, your favorite in this fight is -140. Your underdog is +115. Who are they?
Oh, man, I have no idea. Tecia Torres' favorite?
You had been perfect so far. You have your first slip up of the night. Tabatha Ricci is -140. Tecia Pennington +115. This also is, this will be the unveiling of our newest segment, since this is 5'1", generously so listed Tecia Pennington versus there's no way she's really 5'2", Tabatha Baby Shark Ricci. This will be the first fight where we have to ask, could Portia Baines block these women's jump shot? I am going to guess that she probably could. She's a little shorter, and while both of these are very athletic little straw weights, Ricci probably doesn't have much basketball skill. I mean, if it was, could Portia block her penalty kick? No way. And then Pennington, also a fantastic athlete. She doesn't strike me as the type to do much hooping. So much as it pains me to say it, I think the tiny Welsh woman could probably swat both of these ladies' jump shots.
One thing you forget is Tecia Torres originally is from Fall River, Mass, which is it's a rough area. I used to live in Fall River, but it's the city that the former Chris Herren, NBA star, if you follow Chris Herren, was the Boston Celtic who was like doing, I don't know, what was he doing? Like heroin and shit as he was playing. He was like a first round pick, and he dropped like 50 points, and he was like leaving the arena at halftime to go get some cocaine and shit. His brother actually works for my police department. He's actually I think the guy, he's became like a public speaker. He actually went to my kid's school and talked to them. So Herren, not the guy from Iraq.
Okay.
But so he's actually had an incredible turnaround. So good for him. But so I'm gonna say she can stop Tabatha Ricci. I can't picture Tabatha Ricci knowing like dribble and kind of fade away. But Tecia, I think Tecia could like box her up and pump fake and then step back, fade away, jump shot. I'm gonna say Tecia. I don't think she gets Tecia's.
No, I think Tabatha Ricci probably like dribbles it with like both hands, and, like plants both feet and does like the two-handed set shot, like some player from the 1940s that's like wearing Chuck Taylors to play basketball in. I agree with you. We'll have to see what Portia has to say about it, but that's the new segment. We'll probably have to dust it off at least a couple times a year.
And Portia's from like Wales and stuff, so
yeah, I mean,
there's no way she knows anything about basketball there. Have you been like a Welsh basketball? I mean, I'm not the biggest NBA guy, but
not that I can think of, honestly. Yeah.
It's hard for a third world country to send someone to the NBA. Anyways, this fight is. Yeah, this fight is so close. I had a hard time wondering. When I was really stuck on who was winning. I said, "Oh man, Tecia's a bigger name. She's been around for a while. That's why I kind of wondered." But it's hard to really know what you get with Tecia Torres after her being out for 2 years. How does her body react to having a baby? Obviously, is a huge thing. Besides being out for 2 years, but the thing that shocked me is she's only 34.
Yes, thank you.
I expected her to be so much older. Like I
expected 37 or 38.
Yeah, yep. She's like 34. So that's. Man, she's been in the UFC a long time, so she obviously got in really, really young.
Well, she's one of the OGs. She's one of the ones that came over when the UFC established the division all the way back in 2014.
Yeah, she was on the reality show.
Mm-hmm.
Like she did it with the one that Carla Esparza won to win the title.
Yeah, and she lost to Esparza in the quarterfinals. Yeah.
Yeah, like beat Rose in the finals, but Rose had hair then. So that kind of. So obviously, when we break down film on somebody, we have to go by what we last seen. It's like we're not going to guess. What we've last seen of Tecia Torres, she's a girl that constantly switching stances, fights out of both things, good volume. She likes to stay on the outside, move, footwork, and then crash in and blitz. She's got quick hands. She attacks with combos, throws a lot of kicks. She adds kicks into her punching combinations. Despite being undersized, she likes to battle in the clinch. You'd expect her to get out-muscled, but it's actually a safe place for her a lot of times. Mm-hmm. Not much of an offensive wrestler. She likes to work in the clinch, but she's not looking for takedowns. Good get-up game if she's taken down. And she's shown that she's athletic and has the cardio to go hard the entire fight. Ricci, you mentioned it. It's not often she has to be the taller fighter, so that's kind of cool for her. She's very athletic. She also moves well. She fights out of both stances also. Good boxing. Likes to stick and move. Cut angles really well, kind of get her opponents guessing. She gets in the pocket and she lands good hard shots, fast hands. She can fall in love with her overhand right, trying to land a big power shot. She's got a nice pop in her shot. Something I've seen her add more recently. She's before she was more of a point fighter in the striking. She's starting to land some big shots. Doesn't have much of a kicking game. Doesn't really throw kicks as much. She also likes to roll with punches, which never looks good to the judges. She's a judo black belt. She actually uses her height, disadvantage well in the clinch because she kind of gets her head right underneath her opponent's chin. Now that's obviously not going to be the case against Tecia Torres, but it's something she likes to do. Good at getting up a body lock. She also shoot and get takedowns with entries. Good top game. Good BJJ. She has 3 subs on the record. And she showed, a good ability to avoid submissions when Polyana Vanna was throwing up submissions at her. These fighters are very similar the way they fight. They're both shorter, stick and move artists, use movement, as a tool. Torres has a bigger kicking game, while Ricci hits harder and is the better offensive grappler. It's so hard guessing what you're going to expect from Torres, due to long layoff. But if she's lost a step at all, Ricci could win. For that, I'm going to say Ricci gets the better of the exchanges and wins the decision. Give me Ricci by, I'll say it's really close. I'll see split decision.
Yeah, I like that you pointed out the similarities between these two. Obviously, the physical similarities being 2 short women, even for strawweight, but who are muscular.
They must look like each other, too.
Yeah, they look a bit like each other.
Very dark hair. Obviously one's Brazilian, one's Portuguese, but yeah, dark hair and darker complexion and stuff.
Yeah, and both jacked. Yeah, and jacked and have kind of like the strong angular face features. No, I see that completely, and Torres, I need to stop doing that. Pennington, her nickname, the Tiny Tornado, is one of the most accurate nicknames in all of MMA. Just
I like how you call it Tecia Torres one time. You're like, I gotta stop doing that. I completely call it Tecia Torres the entire 12 times.
Hey,
sorry. It took me about I don't know 3 fights before I stopped calling Nina Ansaroff. Yeah, I still say Nina Ansaroff instead of Nina Nunes.
Yeah, it's it gets us all.
Chikagian, forget it. She's never getting it.
It took us too long to learn to pronounce Chikagian. We're not abandoning it now. Screw that. No. No, we average it both together. It's like that what it's called scramble golf, where 4 guys golf together. They all hit the ball. And
so real quick, my daughter has a girl on her travel team that she's been with for 4 seasons. Her name's Ellie. She's one of the pitchers. She's a great kid. So consequently Ellie. But her catcher on her junior high team is Ella. And I cannot call her Ella. Every single time she gets up, every play, I'm like, nice job, Ellie. And my daughter and my wife, they have to correct me every single time. And it'll be a 7-inning game, and I'm going to call her Ellie 15 times. Anyways, sorry, Ellie. No, Ella. See, I just called her Ellie.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, my parents have had 4 kids, and the first 3 they named Ben, Ken, and Diane. They got our names wrong all the time. And just anyway, why do that to yourself? You mentioned that Pennington is surprisingly stout in the clinch. You don't need to look any further back for that than her win over Angela Hill. It was a closely contested fight, but kind of the difference maker is where Hill is normally surprisingly rugged in the clinch. At the time, Torres just got the better of a lot of those. And that was to my surprise. I believe I picked Hill in that fight just because I thought their Muay Thai styles would end up in a lot of clinches, and I thought Hill would get the best of it, and she didn't. So if Pennington is the same fighter that smashed Sam Hughes, beat Angela Hill, really took Mackenzie Dern to the wire, she has a very good chance of beating Ricci. So like my pick here, if I go Pennington, it's me saying that, yeah, she's still just 34. She has a reputation of being a bit of an ATT gym rat. So, baby aside, I don't imagine that she got out of shape or got that rusty. And if I say I'm going strongly for Ricci, it's me saying, well, yes, Ricci is good, which I think she is, but also that it's possible that Pennington might have slipped a little bit because she really does depend on speed and explosion for her kind of like bounce into range style. And also that there just might be a bit of rust. If Pennington just looks out of sorts in the first round and it takes her that first 5 minutes to really get into gear, that might be the entire difference in the fight. That might be the difference between winning and losing. Ricci is the slight favorite, and I think that's exactly why. I have the feeling that if Pennington was coming off the Hill and Dern fights, but it was 6 months ago instead of 24 months ago, I bet this would be pick'em. I'm with you. I'm leaning towards Ricci, but if Pennington comes out and looks fantastic in the first round and she wins a competitive fight, that wouldn't surprise me in the least. And it'll be good to have her back. What would surprise me would be a blowout either way. Just, that's my thought. Thus far, Pennington really hasn't lost to anyone bad. Like she had that 4-fight win streak that led, or 4-fight losing streak that led a number of people to write her off. And when you look back, Jessica Andrade, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Weili Zhang, and Marina Rodriguez was an absolute murderer's row of people to fight in a row. Like champ, and perennial top 10 fighter who at the time was cruising, up towards title contention. If Pennington, and she was competitive in all of them, like none of those women stopped her. If Ricci blows her out, then Ricci is better than I thought she was. But I don't think that's the case. Give me Ricci in a really competitive decision here, and probably a really fun, high volume, battle where both women's cardio is on full display. Next up on the UFC on ESPN 56 undercard is a lightweight clash between Terrance McKinney and Esteban Ribovics. McKinney, the 29-year-old Washington State native, is 15-6 overall. He is 5-3 since joining the UFC as a veteran of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on the Contender Series back in 2019, got knocked out by Sean Woodson, whom we'll be talking about a little later, went on a nice little win streak in various regional promotions and got the call from the UFC in 2021. Since then, as I mentioned, 5-3. He is on a 2-fight win streak. He fought 4 times last year, lost his first 2 appearances of the year, but closed out the year with first-round knockouts of Mike Breeden and Brendan Marat. The most recent of those, the Marat fight, was in October at the Jousset versus Barboza fight night. He's looking to make it 3 in a row, perhaps finally establish some kind of consistency to his UFC run, which has been alternately dazzling and disappointing. He'll have to get past Ribovics to do it. Ribovics, 28-year-old Argentinian, 12-1 overall, 1-1 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series as an undefeated at the time prospect. He suffered his first career loss a little over a year ago, dropping a unanimous decision to Loic Rajabov at UFC 285. He bounced back from that in July with a unanimous decision win over Camuela Kirk. Odds here, Ribovics is he's not a huge favorite, but by the standards of this card, a pretty big favorite. He's -190, McKinney +160. I'm going to throw something out here, and I'm not normally a guy that brings a lot of stats to these previews. I think that's the lazy man's way to pick and handicap fights. I mean,
maybe the intelligent way. Who knows?
Well, yeah. I feel bad.
We were good at this.
If I'm bad at this, it's not because I'm lazy, it's because I'm dumb.
Okay.
So I will call names when you see, you know, Yanni the Greek or Minty Betts doing a segment it's a 3-minute segment, and 2 minutes is saying fighter A is 5-1 against Southpaws, fighter B is 2-4 after eating pancakes for breakfast. Looking up stats is easy. Watching tape is hard and takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So
right.
I'm gonna bring a stat here, but I'm gonna elaborate on it a little bit. So if you've been watching the UFC for even a year or two, you know that Terrance McKinney is the ultimate live by the sword, die by the sword fighter in the entire promotion right now. Yeah. He has 21 professional fights. He's only been to the third round once, and it was in like his third fight.
That's nuts.
Okay, here you go. He has 8 fights in the UFC, and he's never been past the midpoint of any of them. He's never been to the middle of the second round. But this is the crazy part, okay? If you list all 8 of his UFC fights in order from the shortest to the longest, because in the UFC, he has a 7-second knockout of Matt Favola. He has a 20-second knockout of Brendan Marat. But if you list them from the shortest to the longest, the first 5 are his wins. His 3 longest fights in the UFC are his losses.
Yeah.
That's the key to Terrance McKinney. And obviously anyone can say, well, you know, either McKinney is going to starch this guy or tap him out in a minute, or he's going to lose.
That's exactly what I'm going to say.
And I'm saying it too.
Sprinkle the under.
But here's the reasoning behind it. Part of it is, McKinney's insane go for broke style, and probably hit his weight cut, make it so that he does not have good cardio. He might have the worst cardio of any fighter as good as him in a weight class as low as his in the entire UFC. But the other problem is if the fight goes past the first couple of minutes, his opponents start to figure him out because he doesn't really have much of a game plan if the fight goes beyond that. I mean, look at his fight with Drew Dober. That was a little over 2 years ago. It was the most fun I have had in 3 minutes and 17 seconds since my senior prom night. But they swung on each other.
Nice job, man.
They swung on each other like a pair of maniacs for the first 90 seconds. Both guys got hurt. Like Dober was completely on skates a couple times too. But about 2 minutes in, if you watch that fight, they both just kind of take a deep breath. And then Dober goes back to work, and McKinney looks bewildered, like the fight just started again. Same, and his other losses in the UFC, Ismail Bonfim is just a better fighter. Nazim Sadikov is probably just a better fighter. But again, there was some wild early going where McKinney had his moments, but as the fight went along, the other fighter was just better prepared. Better cardio, yes, probably more durable, but also just better prepared. That's the real problem with McKinney, and that's what's kind of defining it's defined all of his losses in the UFC, and it's what's going to continue to define his ceiling, because he can finish anybody in that division in 30 seconds. Like, I don't favor anybody in the UFC lightweight division against Islam Makhachev. Like, he's going to be probably minus 400 against his next, against all of his title challengers until he loses. But
yeah,
if he's fighting Terrance McKinney this Friday or this Saturday, I'm not getting up. I'm going to watch that shit because McKinney's going to come out with like a flying something, or just, or just, jump guard with a guillotine that might actually work. The question here is whether that'll cost him against Ribovics. And the funny thing is, Ribovics has a little of the same vibe. He is a guy that he only had his first loss period when he got to the UFC, but he's a pretty big lightweight who's athletic, aggressive to a fault. And much like McKinney, he's an equal opportunity maniac. Like, he has just a super aggressive ground game, a preference for arm locks. I mean, I think he won like 4 fights in a row by Kimura, but a wild swinging guy on the feet that likes to get into a brawl, and at least on the way up could always trust himself to come out on top just because he was bigger, he was faster, he hit harder. he ran into Loic Radzhabov, and that just didn't work. And it's maybe an indication that it's not going to work against UFC level lightweights. But he's a guy that I'm kind of hoping will calm down and, get a more focused game, because I do see good upside in him. But here, Ribovics is exactly the kind of guy that is going to give Terrance McKinney a chance to do the Terrance McKinney thing. That's why I'm kind of surprised that the line is what it is. Like, I'm not terribly surprised that Ribovics is the favorite, but I'm surprised that he's almost 2-1, because he's extremely likely to come out and get in the wild brawl with Terrance McKinney. And if McKinney even like reaches down and like touches his leg, I think Ribovics will just dive right into one of those Looney Tunes scrambles, where the Looney Tunes fight, there's the cloud of dust with like feet and fists flying out of it. Ribovics is going to give McKinney every honest shot to win this fight. The question is whether I think it happens. And I've been going back and forth on this fight all day long. Well, all week long. Give me another upset here. I think Ribovics has more upside. I think McKinney is dangerously close to being one of those he is what he is type guys, even though he is still very young, or relatively young. He's still in his 20s. Ribovics, even though they're close to the same age, has more of the prospect still being molded feel, probably just because he has so many fewer fights at the highest level. This could seem like a really silly pick if this just turns into another fight where McKinney wins the first minute of the fight, and then what's happening after that, and he gets finished, early in the second round. But give me McKinney by first round knockout here, or if it turns into a first round club and sub, that wouldn't surprise me either. But give me Ribovics to lose a fight he probably should win by obliging Terrance McKinney with just a wild brawl.
Yeah, this is a really exciting fight, because it's got to be something bonkers. That's what McKinney fights. Yeah, I mean, Ribovics being a pretty hefty favorite, pretty sizable favorite. I don't feel comfortable picking anybody against McKinney, because McKinney, dude, he could knock out freaking Frankenstein. You know what I mean? If he lands his big shots. The guy's a southpaw, but he's a very explosive fighter. You mentioned it. He's extremely fast starter. He comes out throwing hard, long distance strikes, fast hands. I like that he works the body. He's quick. He hits hard. Massive power. I mean, even losses. Like think of like Drew Dober fight. He almost starts Drew Dober in a fight that he lost.
Yeah.
The issue is he tries a walk-off KO like every single punch. It really overextends his punch, and he can make the mistake of throwing shots from his hips and kind of leaving himself open to counter. And because he comes out like a berserker, he needs to stop it early. I know it sounds lazy to be like, the deeper the fight goes, at least I feel comfortable picking McKinney, but there's a reason why it's said a lot, because it's true.
No, it's absolutely true.
He gasses himself a little bit. He also tends to check out. I said it before. He seems like a bit of a front runner. And you know what, though? That's been said about other guys who were able to turn around. I mean, Charles Oliveira at one point was considered a front runner. I saw someone who was talking bad about the guy who retweeted I like, but he was responding to somebody else's tweet, and it was talking about, I don't remember who it was. Maybe Bonfim, maybe, or not the one who just fought. Not
Gabriel Bonfim.
Gabriel Bonfim.
Yeah.
And he was saying like, oh, that guy's a fraud and all this. And I'm like, I remember when Robbie Lawler lost to Pete Spratt, and he came out like guns when he looked good, and then he tended to gas a little bit. Spratt took over, and it was, oh, Lawler's a front runner. Lawler doesn't have the fighting spirit when he gets hard. He's just an athlete. Like, imagine that thing about freaking Robbie Lawler. But that's what remember, that's what was said about him.
Yeah. Yep.
And so we could laugh about that with Terrance McKinney one day. We could be like, dude, that's stupid stuff you say about Terrance McKinney.
Yeah.
He's still, he's a little older, so it's not like he's like super young, but Yeah, he still has some time.
But he's around the, like at age 29, Charles Oliveira was still considered a flaky,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So, a good kicking game. He throws hard push kicks, a lot of high kicks. Like that's something I can see him throwing. Like it's right away, throwing a high kick to start the fight, and then it gets crushes. He likes flying knees. He can get inside. I mean, he beat the crap out of Eric Gonzalez to the clinch. He's a good wrestler. He's a junior college All-American. He's really fast entries, turns corners really well, looks at advanced position on the ground, hard ground and pound. He's got 7 sub wins, but he quickly subbed Eric Gonzalez. I don't know if that's the case. The avenue he wants to do against Esteban, but it's just something that's in my notes for him. But he tends to guess. If he guessed against Drew Dober in the first round, you have to worry about his durability. I mean, he was knocked out by Sean Woodson, Drew Dober, Israel Bonfim. They all knocked him out. And he seems to not react well to punches. He almost overreacts when he gets hit. Ribovics, he's also a good athlete. On the feet, he fights out of both stances, high volume, tight boxing, not much tells. Works behind a crisp jab. He attacks with combos, throws a lot of power shots. You mentioned he can be wild. He can be reckless, which leaves him open to counter. I mean, he got tagged up even in a win on the Contender Series. But in his UFC debut, it was a little more controlled and definitely the avenue of that's the way to victory against McKinney. You come out like, you try to match McKinney's fast start, you could get caught. He does have plus power. He also loves flying knees. He's a guy, he's a good grappler, but he's not a great wrestler. His takedown defense is weak, but he's a good, obviously, BJJ artist. He's pretty good at winning scrambles. He can catch Kimura. You meant catch submission. You mentioned he's a bit of like a Kimura specialist. Hits Kimuras from like every position possible. He improved his ability to get off the bottom and get to Kamala Kirk as the fight went on, which was something that showed growth in his game because he'd kind of play BJJ a little too much and get stuck on bottom. And he showed he has cardio. He can go hard the whole time. I like McKinney early, obviously. The deeper the fight goes on, the more I like Ribovics if the fight hits the ground. I think McKinney can do well early, but obviously he's going to have to be perfect as Ribovics going to be tacking. He's going to be rolling to Kimuras, rolling maybe to knee bars, all kinds of stuff. I think both guys are good. They both guys are super fun. Dude, we're going to have our third consensus upset. I'm going to go with McKinney. I'm going to say he does it. I think it comes out both guns blazing. That's the way you got to pick him. You know what? I still believe in McKinney. Every fight he has, I start every loss, I should say, I start disbelieving more and more. This might be like the last stand for him. Mm-hmm. I say he lands something big. I say he does it early. I think he does it a minute and a half in. Give me like McKinney by first round knockout.
There you go. That's 3 upset picks in the first 6 fights. And yeah, just one last note. I forget the first guy that we said this about, but McKinney has bad losses in the UFC. In fact, all of his losses are horrible, but he doesn't have losses to bad guys.
Yeah.
And some of his wins have aged well. Like him groveling Perez Zayam. Zayam's 5-1 in the UFC now.
We recently said it about Alex Perez. Like Alex Perez didn't have, like he had a bad streak, but who he lost to wasn't bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next up at UFC St. Louis, and at least as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, the top prelim is a lightweight matchup between Chase Hooper and Viacheslav Borshchev. Hooper, the 24-year-old Washington State native, is 13-3-1 overall. He is 7-3 since joining the UFC as a veteran of season 2 of Dana White's Contender Series. He won on the Contender Series, but was not immediately signed. Since getting signed, again, 7-3. He's on a 2-fight win streak. He fought twice last year, taking a unanimous decision over Nick Fiore in May, and then coming back and tapping out Jordan Levitt in November at UFC Fight Night, Allen versus Craig. He will look to make it 3 in a row, his first such streak in the UFC. In order to do so, he will need to get past Slava Claus. 32-year-old Russian by way of Sacramento is 7-3-1 overall. He is 2-2-1 since joining the UFC out of the 5th season of the Contender Series. He fought to a draw in his last fight, fought twice in 2023, knocking out Maheshate in May, then coming back and fighting Nazim Sadikov to a majority draw at UFC 295 in November. So he'll look to get back in the win column here. He is moderately favored to do so. Borshchev -175, Hooper +145. Keith, in preparing for this fight, I was surprised when I did the math and I realized that Hooper is 7-3 in the UFC. It's very much the same thing.
I love
that
it.
kind of informed the popular narrative about Sage Northcutt, where Northcutt, what a joke, what a bust. The UFC's golden boy. The UFC, Sage was 6-2 when the UFC cut him, and they cut him off a win. Sage Northcutt was not a bad fighter.
No.
And Hooper, he was the youngest guy in the UFC when they signed him. Very famously, he was like 19 years old. There were the jokes that he was, Ben Askren's illegitimate kid. For a kid, I'm still going to call him a kid. He's literally, younger than my oldest son. For a kid that has literally learned to fight under the brightest lights, was signed too early, you would expect that school of hard knocks to result in something worse than a 7-3 record in the UFC. But he's 7-3, and while he definitely remains a bit of a specialist, like he is best at grappling, his striking is developing. I think part of it is just that he's growing, like just physically maturing, becoming a physically stronger guy. He seems to be a better athlete than he was. This sounds insulting, but his first couple fights, win or lose, he just kind of seemed weak and slow and in over his head. Like I was like, well, this is a lot of fun while it lasts, but this dude is not long for the UFC. I still don't think he is a future top 15 guy at 155 pounds, though I've certainly been more wrong than that. Just, his physique, his skill set. I look at the top 15 at 155 pounds, and those are all guys that would just eat him for lunch. But he's become a solid guy. He's not fighting for his job on Saturday. He's fighting for a 3-fight win streak. This is, again, one of the old school specialist versus specialist matchups that you see more and more rarely these days as the sport becomes more well-rounded, because Borshchev is a very good kickboxer who has severe obvious deficiencies on the ground. The difference with Borshchev is he's 32, and I think I'm pretty sure he was already 30 when he hit the UFC, even though he's at a great camp to shore up your ground game in Team Alpha Male. Just the clock's ticking. Hooper is literally 8 years younger than him. Hooper is a better striker than he was 5 years ago, but he's still not a great one, especially defensively. Like, he's still a tall fighter, and I just said this about Trey Waters earlier on this card, but he's a tall fighter who, in his mind, knows that he is best served by an out fight on the feet, but just doesn't have the skills or physicality to impose it on people, especially just better strikers with better footwork, anyone who's physically strong enough to bully him around, anyone who's athletic enough to slip past his jab and kicks and just get into the phone booth. Borshchev is all those things, man. Like, if this goes to the ground at any point, all bets are off. Hooper is, he's not a lights out wrestler, but he's a good grappler. He's good in scrambles, just long arms and legs, good at taking the back in transition, good at threatening with submissions from odd angles where his opponent clearly didn't expect it. And Borshchev has just seemed really hapless when fights have gone to the ground. Like, just not good fighters have really run game on Borshchev on the ground. I'm sure that's improving from fight to fight, again, as he works with just a team of monster wrestlers and ground guys at alpha male, but I can't imagine he has shored up his deficiencies more since his last fight than Hooper has. Man, I so badly want to go with another upset and pick Hooper here. But the thing is, while Borshchev has been out wrestled and out grappled, he hasn't been tapped out. Like, he's been in trouble a few times and he's maintained his composure. He's done the right things, you know, with Uriah Faber yelling at him to survive those situations. So for me to pick Hooper, I'm really picking Hooper to be able to get Borshchev down in at least 2 rounds and threaten enough, you know, with submissions and positional dominance to win the rounds while not getting knocked out on his way to do it. And that's just hard for me to pick. Give me Borshchev to win a decision here, probably pretty one-sided, where he is just hacking at Hooper's legs, going with kicks to the body. Hooper's tendency to not move his head and keep his hands kind of down. I could see Borshchev head kicking him or just catching him with some monster punches, but Hooper's been surprisingly tough, so I'm not picking the knockout here, but give me Borshchev to kind of put Hooper through the meat grinder. This is a pretty friendly matchup for Slava Borshchev because it's a guy that, yeah, he's a better grappler, but is probably going to struggle for ways to get the fight down.
Yeah. Side note, as you mentioned, Sage Northcutt, I've always found it super weird that people like love the downfall of Sage Northcutt. I don't get it. The guy's the nicest guy on the planet Earth. Like he should be a guy people root for. I will admit this, like, yeah, I'm a Christian and my wife's Christian. My wife is the most Christian person I've ever met. So I tend to like cheer for the people who are openly Christian. That said, like that's like if he was your son, like that's exactly the kind of person you want your kid to grow up to be like. So,
and I mean, he looks like the bully bad guy from like an 80s or 90s high school movie. Yeah. And if he was an arrogant like asshole, he'd be real easy to hate.
Yeah,
but I've interviewed him. I think you've interviewed him. He's
no, I haven't, but at least I don't think I have.
Yeah, he's the nicest guy. Like just and in much the same way as Stephen Thompson, you can tell it's genuine.
Yeah, like, exactly.
Yeah, I would
only put it on for so long. You can only put on the gimmick
exactly
for so long. And I'm not saying his lifestyle is gimmick. You know what I'm saying? If it was fake.
Yeah, if it were,
why you get moments with Colby Covington where he's not like a prick.
Sure.
You know, because they forgot to put it on. So.
Yeah, like I would be surprised. Like I'm not Christian, but he walks his talk, and he clearly not a Christian of convenience. Like kind of like Stephen Thompson. They're two of the guys that I would be most shocked to find out, like, you know, they were cheating on their wife or hell, even like cheating on their taxes. Like they're just good dudes.
Yeah. So it could happen though.
They're the guys that actually read the Bible instead of just scrolling to the end and clicking I agree like it's an Apple user agreement.
Yeah, like it's a contract. Yeah. This fight, you're right, absolutely right about Chase Hooper's record in the UFC is pretty stunning. If even you went back a couple years ago and finished, we're the guys that be like, hey, hold off, don't quit on someone who's super young. But part of me was like, oh man, this ain't the guy. If you told me a couple years ago that I'd be intrigued by a Chase Hooper fight, I've been surprised. But I really am at this point. If he wins this fight, like throughout this narrative, like he's, especially if he does somewhat okay on the feet. Now, am I expecting him to do well on the feet? No, I don't. And not against a level striker like Borshchev. Hooper, he's not much of an athlete. But he's a southpaw. He tries to use his length from striking range. He marches forward with good output. He throws straight punches down the pipe, but his strikes aren't the fastest. They don't have much power. He hasn't really come into his power or really developed any power. He throws a lot of arm punches, kind of does the same like 1-2 combination. He was something they was like trying against Alex Caceres, and his defense is bad. I mean, he got beat up by Steven Peterson, beat up by Steve Garcia. Doesn't really move his head, doesn't react to strikes too well, kind of flops around. I mean, his whole thing is he wants to grapple. Not the best wrestler, but I'll say this: he's relentless to get the fight there. willing to pull guard, willing to imminent roll, willing to just kind of bull rush his foes. If he gets to the fight to the ground, I mean, the guy is busy, mean ground and pound, super slick. I mean, back takes against like Alexis Vila, who's a good grappler himself, very aggressive, uses his long arm and legs, locking submissions. We saw that he gets in the Peter Barrett fight, very funky style grappling, hips are constantly moving, can get submissions everywhere. I mean, he subbed Jordan Levitt. Say what you want, but that's Jordan Levitt's world, and he dominated it there. And he's got good cardio. I'll say that he's good cardio, and he's got toughness. Like you don't think about because he's like this goofy kind of kid, but kid's tough, man. He'll take a beat and keep coming. Borshchev, he's an incredible striker. Obviously, kickboxing level. I think he was a champion. Does fight in the Muay Thai striking style. Stands a little tall in front of his opponents. Doesn't really move that much, but he's quick and he's explosive. He's super accurate. Nice jab, hard, tight hooks, crushes the body. I mean, go back to the Dakota Bush and just see what he did to Dakota Bush with body shots. Good at slipping his head off the center line and countering with some of his own power shots. I love his kicking game. Kicks to all areas of the body. Some of the best calf kicks you'll see. He obviously has serious knockout power. The issue is he's been rocked himself. I mean, he was hurt bad against Sadikov in his last fight. You can go back to Chris Duncan. Duncan dropped him with a shot. Duncan hurt him with a calf kick. You mentioned his grappling. He's a terrible grappler. Offensive grappling is not there. One of the worst defensive wrestlers in the UFC, possibly the worst defensive wrestler in the UFC. Mark Casey took him down 11 times. Mike Davis took him down 9 times. But to his credit, you don't get those many takedowns unless you get him back up his feet. And he is hard to hold down. And you mentioned he's hard to submit. So this is, again, I feel it's lazy, like similar to the Terrance McKinney fight, where it's just like, well, this is the ultimate striker versus grappler. Mm-hmm. Where both guys have massive advantages in their respective area. But that's the case here. I don't think this will be a close fight. I think one guy will destroy the other. Either Hooper gets the fight to the ground and quickly, and I don't want to say quickly subs, but quickly dominates, controls, backpacks him, does all that. I'll say this. Yes, Borshchev has gone, it's been long times on the ground and not been submitted, but this is probably the best submission artist he's faced. Not the best grappler. DeCasey is probably the strongest wrestler, or Davis is a pretty solid wrestler himself, but they're not the submission threat that Hooper is. If Hooper doesn't dominate, then it's probably Borshchev blasting Hooper. So I'd sprinkle on the under in this fight. That especially if you think Borshchev's going to win. I almost want Hooper to get the fight to the ground, and dominate, because I like to go against the grain a little bit. Like the people people hate this guy, then I'm going to root for this guy. I think he actually will get Borshchev down. I think Borshchev's going to do what you said, hold off, get back to his feet. I'm glad that you were super on the fence, because I'm on the fence too, which is crazy to think. I never expect to be on the fence on a Chase Hooper fight, especially against a guy that I think is has huge advantages. I just expect he's going to make a mistake. He's going to have to come in. He's going to have to eat shots. I expect Borshchev to land some shots, possibly maybe some body shot, maybe drops him, hurts him with a body shot, and I think he gets a KO late in the first round. Give me Borshchev by first round TKO.
The 6-fight main card of UFC St. Louis begins with a heavyweight slugfest between Waldo Cortes-Acosta and Robelis Despaigne. Cortes-Acosta, the 32-year-old Dominican by way of Arizona, is 11-1 overall. He's 4-1 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He is on a 2-fight win streak. After opening last year with a decision loss to Marcos Rogerio de Lima, he bounced back with a first-round knockout of Lucas Dreski in August. Then in his first fight this year, took a unanimous decision over Andrei Arlovsky. He will look to make it 3 in a row at the expense of the undefeated Despaigne. 35-year-old Cuban is a perfect 5-0 as a professional. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC earlier this year. He made his debut at UFC 299 in March against Josh Parisian, needing just 18 seconds to knock him out. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that the 18-second knockout is actually Despaigne's second longest career fight. He will look
nuts.
He will look to make it a perfect 6-0 to open his career, a perfect 2-0 to open his octagon run. He is moderately favored to do so. Despaigne minus 170, Cortes-Acosta plus 140. Okay, I'm going to sound conflicted here, like I'm having an argument with myself, because on the one hand, I'm going to say that I'm not buying into all the Robelis Despaigne hype. Like, it's obvious. It's obvious why the hype is there. He's this absolutely titanic guy that is a decorated karate practitioner and has been knocking everybody out in literally 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 12 seconds. That's not going to last forever. Once heavyweight is terrible, but once you get to the top 10, I'd be very shocked if he was. I'd be very shocked if he was even doing that to the Marcos Rogerio de Limas of the world. On the flip side, I'm surprised that the line here is as close as it is, because Cortes-Acosta is tailor-made for Robelis Despaigne to tee off on. I've said on this show a million times about heavyweights that all you need to do to have some pretty decent success at heavyweight, all the way up to the top promotions in the world, all the way up to kind of maybe not the top 10, but skirting around the 25 best heavyweights in the world, is to have one good weapon and the aggression and fight intelligence to leverage that one weapon. Like that's just not true of any other division in the sport. Cortes-Acosta, he has a couple things going for him. One, he's gigantic. Even by heavyweight standards, he is a for real heavyweight he's not that fat, and he sometimes has to cut a little weight to get under 265. Like, he is a huge guy. And while he's not a sensational or complete striker by the standards of any other division, he's one of the rare heavyweights with a pretty good jab who's willing to use it. And that's been enough. Like, he has surprisingly little knockout power for a guy as huge as he is, who throws as many strikes as he does. But at least against the bottom crust of what the UFC's heavyweight division has to offer, it's been enough. Gotten past Jared Vandera, Chase Sherman, Lucas Dresky, who probably should be a light heavyweight, the ghost of Andrei Arlovsky. It wasn't enough against Marcos Rogerio de Lima. De Lima is an experienced veteran kickboxer who does have the full tool set, has very good kicks, very good punches, is more athletic than his kind of barrel-chested physique would lead you to believe, and just he's better than Cortes-Acosta. Against Despaigne, again, Waldo Cortes-Acosta is tailor-made for this man to tee off on, because Cortes-Acosta wants and needs to conduct the fight on the feet, but he doesn't have enough power to give Despaigne much to think about. Despaigne, shockingly fast and nimble for a guy his size, especially a guy his size who's 35. And I mean, he's Cuban, so he might actually be 45. For all we know, he might be the heavyweight Alexis Vila. He's 6'7". He walks around 261 pounds, long legs, long arms, and all of his striking offense maximizes that. It extends it. It's like long kicks that it just seems like he can cover half the cage with kind of one switch, like one switch stance kick. He can go from like one warning track to the other. He covers ground shockingly fast. Everything he throws has monstrous power on it, not because he's over swinging, but just because he's a gigantic guy moving that fast, who nonetheless has his feet under him and is a very experienced striker. Against Josh Parisian in his debut, I mean, we both picked him by first round knockout. It was the most obvious pick of the year. And I at least said I'd be surprised if Parisian even makes it past the first minute. I think Cortes-Acosta might make it to the minute mark. I think Despaigne is likely in for the new second longest fight of his career, but not by much. Yeah, give me Despaigne by first round knockout. I expect he's going to come out in his, kind of low bladed stance, uncoil from that with some huge high kick, even if it's just a kick to just kind of get Acosta backing up and reacting to it. And then he follows it with a very nice straight punch, lances Acosta. Acosta goes down. I expect Despaigne to get the first round knockout here. Again, probably in the first half of the first round. And it could be one of those ones where Acosta doesn't actually lay a finger on him.
Yeah, so I'm going over this dude's record, Despaigne. I mean, his knockouts are, I mean, it's insane. I mean, his entire career is 5 minutes and 31 seconds.
Yep, and 454 of it is his first fight. His last 4 fights, it's a total of 37 seconds.
37 seconds. That's right. Basically, his entire career is the countdown to our recap show. Like the little, like, we give a couple minutes for people to get in, you know, to find the stream. Like, that's his career. I was sitting there thinking, because, you know, the alpha male, you got to think like this, which is it's really stupid. I'm like, I think I could last 18 seconds against him. No, mind you, I'd run away as fast as I possibly could for those 18 seconds, you know, until, you know, until he like friggin' Sub-Zero's me. And it was Sub-Zero that you say, come over here and pull me over.
It was Scorpion because he would shoot the chain.
I'm sorry.
Get over here.
Yeah. Get over here. And then freaking knock my head off. But so I'm not trying to feel like I'd win or anything like that. I just, you know, these guys are dumb enough to go after him. That's the problem. Like, these guys actually think they could win. And that's why they get knocked out as quick as I would be terrified. So I'd run. Like, I'd be like you know, when I was like the other day, I was cleaning up my shed and there was a mouse and I'm like trying to get the mouse and just running around. Like, that what it would be like. You know, it took me more than 18 seconds to get the mouse out of my shed. You know, when I was moving the spreader, the seed spreader. I mean, the guy is huge. He's 6'7", 265, 86-inch reach. I mean, he's got a longer reach than John Jones. So incredible Taekwondo Olympics bronze medalist. He just springs at his opponent. He hangs his hands low, so they all come wild from the side, but they're quick. They're massive power. He throws everything into his shots. I mean, he knocked Parisian out while backing up. Mm-hmm. You know, crushing high kick, mean leg kicks. I haven't seen too much of his offensive grappling, but he did stop some takedown attempts in his MMA debut. Like, you really have to just look at his MMA debut and judge his whole career by it. You know, he didn't have the best technique, but regardless, he'll be hard to take down due to his height. And then you expect him to be better in the grappling since his MMA debut. I'm not expecting him to be, Fabrizio Verdum out there, but he's expecting to be better. Waldo Cortes-Acosta, he's a boxer with good volume. You mentioned he works behind a jab. He sets up his power strikes with the feints, throws clean shots down the pipe. But that really wasn't the case against Andre Arlovski. He looked really bad against him. He kept trying to end the fight with one big shot. He likes to wrap his power shots around his opponent's defense, but he just couldn't do that against Arlovski. Arlovski was avoiding his shots really well. His best thing is when he goes to the body. He does have some power, but I think it's grossly overrated. Like, the broadcast team is going to pretend he hits as hard as like Bo Nickel does, and just not the case. Because of his boxing style, he gets his legs kicked off, and it's like fight after fight after fight. He's open to leg kicks. He also keeps his chin high in the air. He's a weak defensive wrestler. Chase Serpent took him down a bunch of time. He's a weak grappler. Looks one-dimensional. I'm with you. Yeah, I'm all over Despaigne here. I've seen Cortes-Acosta get his legs kicked off, and then you have this big, massive guy that could just kick harder than anybody he's faced. That said, I don't think it's going to be the kicks. I think I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to say the streak continues. I say Despaigne wins a massive shot early. I'm going to say he does it again. I'll say he does it in like 30 seconds. I can't see a way for Cortes-Acosta to win because he's a boxer, Yeah. And
it's why I'm shocked that the line is as close as it is. Like,
I agree.
Despaigne is only minus 170. What do they think Cortes-Acosta is going to do? Like, jab people on the outside for 3 rounds?
I guess. I mean, maybe they're thinking just because of the inexperience, they don't want to lay too much. But I'm with you.
It's fair to ask what his cardio will look like if somebody makes it to the second round.
Yeah. Problem is he's going to knock him out in 30 seconds. So give me Despaigne by first round knockout.
Next up is a featherweight contest between Alex Caceres and Sean Woodson. Caceres, the 35-year-old Floridian training out of Arizona, is 21-14 with one no contest overall. He's 16-12 with one no contest since joining the UFC out of the 12th season of The Ultimate Fighter. He did lose his last time out. He fought twice last year, beat Daniel Pineda via decision in June, then dropped a unanimous decision to Giga Chikadze in August at the Holloway versus Korean Zombie card. So he's been on the shelf for about 9 months. He comes back looking to get back in the win column against Woodson. 31-year-old St. Louis native should get a warm welcome from the hometown crowd. He's 11-1-1 overall. He is 5-1-1 since joining the UFC out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. He's on a 5-fight unbeaten streak and a 2-fight win streak. Fought once last year and once already this year. He took a unanimous decision over Dennis Bazookia last August at UFC on ESPN Sandhagen versus Font. Looked good against Bazookia, but worth noting that Bazookia was literally, I think, the 4th opponent they tried to find for him. Came back at UFC 297 in January and took a split decision over Charles Jourdain. So Woodson on a hot streak, again, hasn't lost a fight in almost 4 years. He is comfortably favored to extend that streak here as he is minus 190, Caceres plus 150. Feel like we say this, or at least I say this every time he fights. Caceres is a fun success story. There's no reason, if you go back to the Ultimate Fighter 12 all the way back in 2010, to believe that he was going to be the guy who stuck around on roster, almost 15 years later. Like, yes, he was I think he was the youngest guy in the house, but and he had kind of the goofy personality because he was 20 years old. We were all recently.
And fantasy still does. He still
does. I mean, he still has the afro with the afro pick in it sometimes. Like he's stuck with the Bruce Leroy gag, but he didn't seem particularly skilled. He wasn't an off the charts good athlete. There was no reason to believe that he would be passing Michael Johnson as the most successful alum of that season, but here he is, and at 35 still fighting the best he ever has. Like, he has continued to improve over the course of his career, and while 35 years of age at 145 pounds, it's definitely on the precipice. He hasn't shown like any signs of serious physical decline. Despite the Bruce Leroy persona, and the kind of stuff he'll do in the cage, he's always been at his best as a grappler and kind of a, funk style wrestler. He's a sneaky grappler. He's good offensively and defensively. He's good in scrambles. He's gotten better at being more of a conservative, round winning, positionally sound grappler as well. It's part of what has sort of powered him to the level where he is, where, yeah, he's not a top 15 featherweight, but again, he's not fighting for his job this weekend, not even close. He's won something like 8 of his last 10 fights. It's been a fun success story. He has become the best possible Alex Caceres he could have been. All credit to him for just continuing to improve. He was one of the earlier guys to get out to the MMA lab. He was ahead of the curve in it becoming one of the best camps in the whole sport. So yeah, he's a lot of fun. He's still a basic striker who doesn't have much power, and he himself is kind of hittable. So he's in trouble when he's fighting a better striker that he can't get to the ground. And that's kind of played out. I mean, who's he lost to in the last 6 years? Giga Chikadze, Sadiq Youssef, and yeah, Kron Gracie. Kron Gracie was an absolutely terrible style matchup for him. But Youssef and Chikadze are just better kickboxers, better athletes with more power. And Caceres just got kind of stuck. Unfortunately for him, That's a pretty good description for Woodson as well. The most obvious thing about Woodson is, of course, his stature. He, in terms of physique, cuts one of the most unique figures in the entire UFC. I don't know if he's the tallest featherweight, but he probably is. I don't know if he has the longest reach, but he absolutely has the longest inseam. Adam Duffy, top on my Bulls list at the last recap. He has funny takes on fighters sometimes, and he told me that Sean Woodson looks like his Adam's sleep paralysis demon, just where he's like all legs and kind of.
He looks like that. What was that? I'm trying to think of Mr. Slender or something.
Slender Man? No, he totally looks like Slender Man. Like put kind of like the big trench coat and stuff on him, and like if his fingers were like extra long.
He looks like he should be like a NBA draft prospect, like that. Like, some guy's analyzing him real deep, and he's like, he's gonna have to put on some size on that frame, but he's got the long wingspan and all that.
No, absolutely. Like, dude, Portia Baines is not swatting away this man's jump shot. You're better at breaking down the technical side of this than I am, but what else I'll say is, he's maybe the most enjoyable pure boxer in the UFC for me to watch. Like, when I talk about boxers, I'm not the analyst you want to ask where he falls in the hierarchy of most technical boxers, but like Terrance Crawford is like one of my favorite boxers to watch. It's technically beautiful to watch. It's nice to watch, just like the little nuances of timing and distance that you can only get with a certain amount of just natural vision and athleticism, and then just tons and tons and tons of reps. I love watching Woodson do his thing. I just love watching his hands. But then on top of it, it would be a shame if a guy that can probably enter the octagon just by stepping over like Ivan Drago entering a boxing ring didn't have good kicks, and he has nasty kicks as well. Being so tall and having such long legs, obviously he's great with the knees. He got to the UFC by killing Terrance McKinney, whom we talked about a little while ago, with a flying knee. Woodson's limitations, I think, are always going to be defensive wrestling and grappling. A fighter who can either get him to the ground and keep him there and beat him up, or can catch him in a moment of inattention, even like on the feet or in a scramble, is probably always going to be able to take advantage of him. But in his entire UFC run so far, only one guy's been able to do that, Julian Erosa, and there's no shame in that. Julian Erosa is elite, at least as a quick strike offensive fighter. Yeah, I understand why the line is what it is, because I think Caceres is going to be stuck on the outside. I think he's going to run into a ton of jabs from Woodson. I think he's going to run into some push kicks right up the middle, just right to the gut, that both stop your forward momentum, hurt like hell, take some wind out of you. It's just going to be rough sledding for Caceres. And if Caceres really decides to try to force the issue and like crash the pocket to, get his hands on Woodson, get a body lock, a standing back take, something to get the grappling going, I could see him running right into a knee or an uppercut and really get hurt. Caceres is normally super tough. He's a hard guy to hurt on the feet, but if he pushes the issue against Woodson on the feet, I could see him getting cleanly knocked out in a way that he really hasn't in his career so far. I'm not picking that to happen. My call is that Woodson gets a dominant decision here, though, where Caceres is just kind of frustrated, stuck in Woodson's world for 15 minutes, and is looking much the worse for wear by the end of it.
Yeah, this is I'm surprised like that we don't get more reports of this, the amount of people turning down fights with Sean Woodson, because it just sounds like if I was a lightweight, that just seems like when I had my one MMA fight, I actually did fight at lightweight, and that sounds miserable. Like if I showed up to the ring, because like this is Rachel, so you don't even know who you're fighting. I mean, I knew the guy's name, but I didn't know anything about him. If I showed up and Sean Woodson walked in, I'd be like, "Yo, fuck that." Like, sorry guys, for my friends who
I just broke my leg.
Yeah. I'm feeling dizzy or something. I had a bad week. So I'd find a reason. I left something on the stove. Like I'd be gone. Alex Caceres. You know what I love about Alex Caceres? I always think about like fight week. Like if he gets interviewed, like a lot of times, like if I'm doing like meaningless work at a computer, or there's some things that just every job has like tedious stuff. I put the headphones in and I listen to like the media interviews for the week. I love when Alex Caceres gets brought in, and someone's always going to ask him his thoughts on other fights in the card, and he's going to be like, "I don't watch fights." and then he's gonna get asked again the very next time they're gonna ask him. So if he's gonna be interviewed, they're gonna ask him about the main event, and he's gonna be like, I don't really know these guys. He's well rounded. He's athletic. He moves well. Southpaw that works behind a jab. I like that he works the body. He did really well against Pineda going to the body. He follows up with weird. He throws some weird angles. He kind of like bounces his head off the line, and he kind of. He loses some power that way, but he has shown some power recently. I mean, he starts Julian Rosa. He hurt Daniel Pineda. Kicks are a big part of his game. He's an underrated grappler. He's a sneaky grappler. His defensive wrestling is pretty bad, but his offensive, he's like this funky style grappling where, he doesn't mind putting himself in bad positions to get a submission. He has great submission defense. I mean, he fought off submissions against Daniel Pineda. He's got 7 subs on himself. He's got a tough matchup against Sean Woodson. I mean, you talk about how big he is. He's massive, constantly switching stances, loves to work from the outside, very calm and poised, just touches until there's an opening. He has this thing where he's moving his hands around so much that it's tough to kind of know where they're coming from. He's got a great jab. He batters the body. He looks, when you crash the pocket on him, he turns everything coming up. He tries to walk you into uppercuts. He seems to be adding punching power, which something like the knock on him was like, for such a big guy, he doesn't really crack, but he's just starting to see that more. He's starting to hurt guys more. He does a lot of high kicks, and it's so easy for him just to toss it up to your head. The way to beat him is to pressure him and force him, to have to really close in those long shots, but you're going to eat shots coming in. The fact that he's added step-in knees when his opponent gets inside is such a great tool to his game. Defensively, he shoulder rolls a lot, which is a very boxing style, which never looks good to judges. He also, I've seen him in the past, not recently, but in the past, he kind of get forced back, and he kind of he has it like Anderson Silva, like having his back against the cage, which I hate that. Obviously, there's certain guys that can do well there, but generally speaking, I think you're taking a huge gamble. I'd like to. He has so he uses the cage to defend takedowns, but he's shown his takedown defense has really greatly improved. That was like a little bit of a weakness, and his sub defense, is better. He did get submitted by Julian Rosa, but that fight is getting further and further, in the rearview mirror. He also gassed in that fight, which we've seen him really improve his gassing as he's gotten older. I'm surprised by that. I expected him to have worse weight cuts. It's still something I'm still always worried because he's such a big dude. I like Woodson here, though. I mean, I think he styles like Caceres. I think his box could be way too much. I don't think Caceres gonna have any answer for him. Caceres might try to wrestle him. I just don't know if he'll be able to get him down. I don't think he gets a KO because Caceres is so tough, but I think Woodson just rolls to a very easy, decisive decision victory.
Next up at UFC on ESPN 56 is a lightweight matchup between Diego Ferreira and Mateusz Rebecki. Ferreira, the 39-year-old Brazilian by way of South Texas, is 18-5 overall. He is 9-5 since joining the UFC as the outgoing LFA lightweight champ. He won his last time out. He came back after about 18 months away last May at UFC Fight Night Dern versus Hill and knocked out Michael Johnson in the second round. That snapped a 3-fight losing streak for him that left some observers, myself included, thinking that perhaps he was done with the sport for good. But nope, he came back last year. He won, and here he is almost a full year later, back in the saddle looking for a second win in a row against Rebecki. Rebecki, 31-year-old Pole, is 19-1 overall. He is 3-0 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He is on, I believe, a 16-fight win streak overall. He fought 3 times last year, all in the UFC, getting a unanimous decision over Nick Fiore. a second-round knockout of Loic Rajabov, and in his most recent appearance at UFC 295 in November, a first-round submission of Roosevelt Roberts. He'll look to make it 4 in a row and mint himself a rising contender in the ultra-crowded UFC lightweight division. He is, I believe, the biggest favorite on the card. Strongly favored to do so. He is minus 280, Ferreira plus 235 on the comeback. Keith, I will flip this to you first since I have a bit of a conflict of interest here. Let me know who you think wins this one, what you think the fight looks like.
Well, I don't think that Rebecki should be the biggest favorite on the card. Just because we've seen Carlos Diego Ferreira look absolutely fantastic in the past. And we've seen him be an elite fighter at times. You know, at 39 years old, that's obviously a good chance that's in the past. But when you have a guy like Despaigne, what he's doing, I mean, that guy should be the biggest favorite on the card. But whatever. Carlos Diego Ferreira, he's undersized for the division. You know, and I know you said this before that he's not a small person, but he looks small for the division.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He looked great in his last fight, and it kind of stopped a little like losing streak. And the thing about him, and he definitely fits in that category where he's got like a losing streak, but he didn't lose to bad guys. He lost to really good guys. Mm-hmm. I'm not sold on him being back to form. I mean, he's really old. Beating Michael Johnson doesn't sell me. You know, the peak of Carlos Diego Ferreira, he was a big volume guy. Mm-hmm. Problem is his volume against Gregor Gillespie, against Mateusz Gamrot was really dropped. Now, he can work behind a jab. I love that he doubles it up. He throws tight shots down the pipe. He loves like this double jab right combo. So kind of very boxing style to it. He also targets the body where he's kind of trying to tire down his foe with that. Not great defensively. He's always been a hittable guy. Got a good kicking game. He likes to wrestle, but he's probably average at it. He's not a fantastic wrestler. But if he can get to fight the ground, he has elite BJJ credentials. The problem is they're just credentials at this point. You know, he was out-grappled badly against really good grapplers, but badly by Gregor Gillespie, by Beneil Dariush. Both guys are elite grapplers, but to me, he's shown that he's not in that category of a grappler anymore. Now, he obviously still submissions, right? He's got 7 subs, but a big concern is he's gassed. I mean, gassed against Gillespie, he gassed against Dariush, he gassed against Gamrot. Those are concerns. Now, things have changed since his last fight. You guys can figure out what I'm saying, that we might see a change physically for Carlos Diego Ferreira. Rebecki, I mean, this guy, when he first came in the UFC, he was a guy I liked a lot. Then he looked bad against Nick Fury, and I was like, oh, wow, he's not that good. But then he's like sensational recently. He's a short, compact fighter. I mean, he looked fantastic and like Razumov. Ran right through Roosevelt Roberts as another fight. That he looked sensational. He's a excuse me. He's a southpaw, really good output. Fights with a lot of pressure. It's kind of bob and weave style where he, slips to the side and he cracks hard, throws hard hooks, works the body well. He has really nice power. He's got 8 KOs, nice inside kicks. I mean, he beat Razumov's legs off with leg kicks. Defensively, he's still easy to hit. And that's because he wants to get a range of land power shots. So he's one of these guys. He's willing to hey, let's test each other's chins. He's a very good wrestler. Good entries, very physically strong. I mean, we saw like a tendency to pick up and slam his opponent. Strong top game, looks to pass. I mean, he had Razumov hit a crucifix at one point, slick back takes, good ground and pound. He's got 6 subs. I mean, he hit Roosevelt Roberts, one of the slickest hombres I've seen in recent memory. He did gas against Nick Fury, but he's looked much better recently. There was a change of opponents. There's a lot of things, there's things sometimes outside the cage that we don't know about. I know you're not going to like this. I don't believe in Carlos Diego Ferreira anymore. I'm all over Rebecki here. I say he beats a Ferreira with his pressure, with his leg kicks, with his power. I think he wins the grappling too. I think Ferreira is good. This guy's bigger, stronger than him. I think he's going to spend a lot of time on bottom. I think Rebecki's going to get a late stoppage. Give me Rebecki by third round TKO.
Yeah, I'm not mad at the pick at all. Like for one thing, I've made it clear that, yeah, I live in Texas, but Texas is a big place. Diego Ferreira operates out of the Rio Grande Valley. Like his gym is literally like 5 miles from the Mexico border. For me, where I live, like Houston, actually like Woodlands or Woodlock, to get to him, it's almost exactly the same distance for you to get from your front doorstep to Baltimore. Like Texas is a big place. No, it's seriously like the same. It's like a 5.5, 6 hour drive. Texas is a big place. So but I like Diego. I've talked to him a bunch of times. He's a super good dude. I mean, I'm not saying that there's a problem with my level of partiality, but I'm literally wearing a Diego Ferreira team shirt right now, just for effect. But there was a time.
Sorry to interrupt you, and I will not drop Carlos Diego Ferreira. I'm always going to leave Carlos in there.
That's okay, because everyone at Fortis just calls him CDF anyway, so he goes by like everyone's name in the initials. But you mentioned that his 3-fight losing streak wasn't against bad fighters, but he looked bad in them is the problem. Because we're talking about a guy that he went on a 6-fight winning streak, and he kind of propelled himself to the edges of the top 10, but he got there, with well-rounded skills, high volume, high motor, aggression, good offensive wrestling for a BJJ guy, and then, very good grappling, but he also got there with toughness and grit. Like he beat Mairbek Taisimov on Fight Island in that fight where like he was an underdog, but it was Fight Island, and it was that event. It was, I think, UFC 242, where it was like 84 degrees in the building. It's like, dude, I'm from Manaus in northern Brazil, and then I moved to the Rio Grande Valley. Like, don't threaten me with a good time. And he just totally outgassed Taisimov. To see the guy that did that, honestly, kind of wilt against both Gregor Gillespie and Mateusz Gamrot is the problem. Because on paper, Dariush, Gillespie, Gamrot, 3 excellent wrestlers, excellent ground fighters. It's understandable that he would lose, but just Gillespie just so out hustled him. And then Gamrot was out wrestling him so bad that the tap to strikes from the knee to the body on the ground, it just felt like a mercy kill. I was surprised he came back at all. And I was even more surprised when he came back and lamped Michael Johnson with like basically a walk-off knockout. But I'm with you. I don't believe he's fully back. For one thing, if he's fully back at age 39, that would almost be a first in the history of this division. Like there's got to be some decline there. And we're talking about a guy who, if we're just talking straight here, he missed 2 years of the prime of his career because he popped badly for performance enhancing substances, and USADA threw the book at him. Now in the post USADA era, maybe he gets a little of that mojo back. I don't know, but even the Ferreira who beat Michael Johnson, I think is going to have rough sledding against Rebecki. I underestimated Rebecki coming into the UFC. He had a gaudy winning streak and a ton of, highlight reel knockouts, but they were mostly against very overmatched foes. And I just thought, okay, he's a stocky, muscle-bound 155-pounder with a high output style. He has passable cardio when he's dominating the action, but I don't think this is going to work in the UFC. And I've been wrong so far. And granted, Nick Fiore and Roosevelt Roberts are not great, but Loic Radzhabov is a pretty legit win, and Ferreira will be another pretty legit win if he's able to do to him what he's been doing to everyone else. Now, when I look at Rebecki, maybe he tops out at being kind of like a poor man's Michael Chandler, where he's strong enough and athletic enough, good enough wrestler, and good enough punching power that the height disadvantage it doesn't really matter. Like Michael Chandler's lost some fights here and there, but it was never because he was like too small. That's a rough look for Ferreira. I wish the guy well. I think he's a super good dude. I've interviewed him, several of his fighters. I like Fortis guys, but yeah, I think it's going to probably be a pretty dominant performance for Rebecki. Give me Rebecki in a pretty dominant decision here, and one where third from the top at UFC on ESPN 56 is a light heavyweight matchup between Alonzo Menafield and Carlos Ulberg. Menafield, the 36-year-old Dallas native, is 15-3-1 overall. He is 8-3-1 since joining the UFC as a two-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He competed on the very first season, stopping Daniel Jolly with an eye injury, was not immediately signed. He came back on season 2, knocked out Deshaun Boatwright in just 8 seconds. That was good enough to get the call. Since then, again, 8-3-1, and he is on a 5-fight unbeaten streak. After dropping a kind of bewildering and flat-looking decision to William Knight back at the end of 2021, he has wins over Askar Mozharov, Misha Serkinov, Jim Crute, well, a draw with Jim Crute, and then an actual win. And in his most recent appearance, took a unanimous decision over Dustin Jacoby. That was in December at UFC 296. So he'll look to extend it to 3 wins in a row against Ulberg, who is in a similar situation. The 33-year-old New Zealander is 9-1 overall, 5-1 since joining the UFC out of season 4 of the Contender Series. After dropping his UFC debut to Kennedy Zechikwu, honestly, by getting caught and then knocked out in a fight in which he had been doing well, he has rattled off 5 straight wins over Fabio Charant, Tafon Nchukwi, Nick Negamarianu, Ior Bateria, and in his most recent appearance at UFC 293 last September, Da Woon Jung, whom he tapped out, of all things, late in the 3rd round. So Ulberg on a 5-fight win streak, flashing some new tools to his game, the former professional kickboxer. And he is a comfortable favorite to keep the good vibes going here, as he is -210, Menafield +170. Keith, let me know how you feel about this one, who you think wins. And while, I mean, Menafield has been a borderline top 15, top 10 guy for a couple of years now as he's racked up this streak. If you're picking Ulberg, tell me kind of what you see as his top upside in this division.
Yeah, I'll do that at the end.
Yeah.
About these guys, just kind of general overview. I'll say this about, I was never high on Menafield, but there's eventually where you got to start changing your opinion on a guy when he starts winning. I mean, if he beats Ulberg, I mean, you're talking about he's got to be ranked and facing like a top, like fighting this guy like Anthony Smith or someone like that, a Nikita Krylov level fighter, if he can beat Ulberg. But it's going to be a tough test. I mean, Ulberg is definitely one of the best. And it's I don't want to say prospects, but he's kind of established himself. But kind of a newer guy. He's an elite athlete. I mean, he's super athletic. He's a good striker, very comfortable and relaxed. He's explosive. Kickboxer who's fast. He's accurate. He's a bit of a sniper with his accuracy. Technically sound, really good from distance. Kind of a classic outfighter. He cuts angles really well when he's attacking, and that's because he has such good footwork. He's good at using his movement to kind of pull his opponents into his power if you chase him. He avoids strikes with his high guard defense, uses feints and hand fighting, and even feints with his hips too to kind of set up his shots. He does really well to keep his distance. Like his check left hook is something he uses really well to keep his distance. He did it against Fabio Charant. Charant could not get past it. I mean, Fabio Charant gave up pretty early trying, but he has really good power, good kicking game. He likes those oblique kicks. He's got mean calf kicks. His ground game has gotten so much better. We've seen it offensively, landing some ground and pound. I mean, he got a sub against Duno Jung, which is, I don't expect him to be a, decorated grappler, but it's something to see that he's improved. Menafield, he also is a good athlete. He moves well. He fights behind high guard defense. He likes to work from distance. He's got a beautiful counter right hand. He has serious power, and we saw him blast Misha Serkinov. We saw him hurt Jimmy Crute a lot in their fight. He often will look for the perfect blow and kind of telegraph and load up everything, and he can overthrow his shots, which leads him to be a big, target to counter. which it's the issue, which is kind of keeping him from the very top of the division. He also fights in spurts. He's with this guy. He likes to kind of conserve his energy, which I actually think has really helped him be a much better fighter. Now, due to his height, he still struggles getting inside guys. I mean, like Dustin Kobe's with his footwork and his length is something he struggled with. I like his kicking game, though. Strong calf kicks. He's got a quick high kick. He used to be a really bad defensive wrestler, but that has come a long way. He's shown a lot of improvement. I mean, stuff takedowns from Devin Clark, Misa Serkinov, Jimmy Crute, they've all struggled to get him down. And overall grappling has come a long way. I mean, he cut Jimmy Crute with the guillotine. He has gassed out in the past, but he's been able to pace himself so much better. I mean, his gas tank has drastically improved where it is not even a concern anymore. Aldrich is looking really good. It seems like he's looking better and better every fight. I don't know when I'm going to stop believing in Menifield. If he builds Aldrich, then I that's it. He's good. I like Aldrich a lot. I think he styles on Menifield. I just picture him being too fast, too explosive, hits too hard. I picture him going after those stumpy legs of Menifield and kicking it over and over again. I think he follows that up with some big shots, lands something big. I say this is like one of those big like wake up calls to the division. Like watch out for Aldrich. I say Aldrich lands something big. Give me him by second round knockout.
Yeah, this was a surprisingly tough one for me to kind of envision and pick, despite how wide the line is. Aldrich is a guy who, and I think I may have said this ahead of one of his last couple of fights, but losing to Kennedy Zechikwu in his UFC debut may have been the best thing that could have happened to him, because coming to the UFC as an undefeated knockout artist who looks like a movie star, is a teammate of Israel Adesanya. Like, if he'd beaten Zechikwu, well, for one thing, they matched him with like a top 20-ish guy at the worst right out of the gate. He probably already would have made it to a title shot by now, and maybe too soon, or would have made it to a serious top level contender just too soon.
Or main event or something like that.
So it may have been the best thing that could have happened to him, because since that fight, he hasn't fought anybody yet as good as Kennedy. Like, this is him 5 wins later, 5 dominant wins later, finally getting back to a guy that's at Kennedy Zechikwu's level or higher. Like, that's what that did for him. It changed the UFC's entire booking approach to him. Because if he beats Zechikwu, he's fighting a top 10 guy in his second UFC fight. And maybe it's too much too soon for him. I've said before, like, stardom is there in the making. He's got the little bit of cocky personality. He looks like the steal your girlfriend villain in like a 90s kickboxing movie. He looks like what it would look like if The Rock had been a kickboxer instead of a football player.
Him and Sage Northcutt together, just stealing your girls. Bad villains.
Yeah. Ahead of one of his previous fights, Keith confided in us that if things ever went wrong between him and Mrs. Shillan, they'd probably both go hang out with Carlos Ulberg separately. So, this should be a coronation for him, because this is matching him against one of the better kickboxers in the division. I'm with you. If he styles on Menifield, the sky is the limit. I think it'll be a little tougher than maybe the odds indicate, or than a lot of observers think, because everything you said is right. Like, Menifield, for as powerful and fast and athletic he is, and as good a striker as he is kind of short and stumpy for the division. Well, I say stumpy like he's, like built like the Penguin. No, he's stocky and just jacked with muscle. But you know what? He had a lot of the same disadvantages against Dustin Jacoby and found a way to win. Jacoby was cutting him up with leg kicks. He was having a ton of trouble getting past Jacoby's jab, and found, just finally kind of gutted it out, walked through a jab, and got to to where he could actually land one of his power punches on Jacoby and actually put him down. He could do that kind of thing to Ulberg, but it would need to be kind of a lapse of attention on Ulberg's part, kind of the way that Zetchukwu caught him. So it's a low-key dangerous fight for Ulberg. Menefield has really turned some corners. Like every loss Menefield has in the UFC, in hindsight, is kind of a head scratcher. Like his three UFC losses: Devin Clark, Ovince St. Preux, William Knight. I think he'd thrash all three of those guys if we fought him again this weekend. It's unfair in the case of OSP because he's like over 40 now, but just, yeah, he's better than his losses, and he's continued to improve, get more well-rounded as he's gone along, found ways to succeed in what should have been bad matchups for him, like the Jacoby fight. He could certainly do that here again against Ulberg, but I'm with you. Ulberg just seems to be, I don't want to say growing in confidence because he does not look like a guy who lacks for confidence, but he's been growing in experience, poise, and composure, the kind of confidence that actually matters in the moment in the cage. I just don't see Ulberg making the kind of mistake that would let Menefield really change the momentum of this fight. You said second round knockout. I'm going to say that this makes it to the third, and I wouldn't be completely surprised if it made it to decision. I could see Ulberg, who's already kind of a wait and snipe kind of guy, being cautious specifically because he realizes that this is the biggest fight of his career so far, that this is the one that actually propels him into the top 10, onto the bottom of the, Sean Shelby speed dial for title type fights. But I do think he keeps it pretty one-sided. I'm going to say he wins by third round TKO. And by the point that comes, Menefield's face is busted up from running into the jab, being pulled onto like the left hook. His legs are chewed up from Ulberg just, continually working on them to hopefully slow Menefield down, keep him on the outside. Give me Ulberg by third round TKO after lots of attrition. And that's I could see that being just the kind of thing that would spark Alex Pereira's interest at 205. A chance to get another scalp from one of his nemesis's teammates and key training partners, another solid kickboxer. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC St. Louis, a welterweight matchup between hometown favorite Joaquin Buckley and Nursultan Ruziboyev. Buckley, the 30-year-old St. Louis native, 18-6 overall, 8-4 since joining the UFC as a veteran of LFA, Bellator, several other promotions. He's 8-4 in the UFC, but it is worth noting that he is 3-0 since dropping to welterweight. He came to the UFC as an undersized, or at least under tall middleweight, dropped to 170 pounds, dropped back to 170 pounds after back-to-back losses to Nasruddin Imavov and Chris Curtis. And since then, he's perfect. He has a knockout of Andre Fialho, a dominant decision over Alex Morono, and in his most recent appearance, just really 6 weeks ago, he has a second-round knockout of Vicente Luque. 4 in a row for a guy with as many highlights as Buckley might allow him to jump the line just a little bit in the 170-pound division, one of the most notoriously difficult to break into the top 10. In order to do so,
he gets a title shot before Bilal Muhammad does.
Absolutely. In order to make any of that happen, though, any of those horrible injustices, he will have to get past Ruziboyev. The 30-year-old from Uzbekistan, by way of Philadelphia, is 34-8-2 with 2 no contests overall. He's 2-0 in the UFC and on a 10-fight win streak overall. He made his debut in the UFC last July, knocking out Bruno Ferreira in like a minute and a half. Came back in March of this year at the same Blanchfield versus Fjordcard, and took about 3.5 minutes to knock out Cedric Dumas. That makes him A-okay in our book, but he is now focused on his upcoming fight. He is, well, let's throw it out there. Keith, your favorite in this fight is -150. Your underdog +120. Who are they?
I'll say Huzbayev is the favorite.
Nope. We've got some hometown love. Joaquin Buckley, -150. Nursultan Ruziboyev, +120. Tell me how you think this one plays out. And I mean, with Buckley, it's a done deal. If he wins in uncontroversial fashion, he'll almost certainly be in the UFC's welterweight top 10. Yeah. He will probably be in Sherdog's welterweight top 15. And again, a guy with his style is likely to, hell, he might actually get in ahead of Bilal, which would be a sad thing. But tell me, if you believe in either of these guys as a future contender.
Yeah, I mean, if he wins, I can see his next fight being on the main card of a pay-per-view, third from the top, fourth from the top, or even of really. So that's the right place, right time. He could be in a fight night main event against. I mean, I could see him going against like Stephen Thompson or Sean Brady or something like that. This is a fun fight. This is the fight that I'm probably most intrigued by. Buckley, I mean, he looked great recently. Obviously, he's an insane athlete. I mean, I still believe he's probably got the best knockout in the history of the UFC. But based on like feet, like athleticism, the Max Holloway one might be up because of the magnitude of everything. But back to Buckley, he's so explosive as an athlete. We've seen that he's got good footwork. He cuts the cage off really well. Good lateral movement. I love that he moves his spot where he's throwing so his opponents don't see it coming. He's kind of darting around. Southpaw, that he's got great output, fast hands. He likes to stand in the range and then dart into the pocket, stand out of range and then dart into the pocket and land big shots. I like his straight left. He's really measuring his shot with that and landing pretty accurate shots. I like that he works the body. He throws a lot of hard hooks. Great ability to land power shots in just the smallest spaces. The way he darts his head, a little bit of a bob and weave style where he darts his head off the center line and really well to set up his knockout shot. Like I would go back to the Jordan Wright one where he just rolls and just lands the perfect shot. He uses feints really well. He rolls with punches, which I'm not crazy about, but based on his physique, the shorter, stockier guy, it works for him better. He's got a quick high kick. I mean, he knocked Andre Fiallo out with a high kick. He's a much better grappler than he gets credit for because we see these knockouts and everything. But he likes to get to the clinch. He likes to work in there, get some body lock takedowns. He took down Abdul Razak Al Hassan like 5 times in their fight. He has been taken down in the past, but he showed against Albert Duraev, a good wrestler. He should really improve takedown defense. If he's on top, he's got hard ground and pound. He showed some really improved cardio in both those fights I just mentioned, Al Hassan and Duraev. Yeah, I was used to be worried about his chin because he was knocked dead by Chris Curtis, but he hasn't even had his legs buckled since then. Huzbayev, he's a really experienced guy for a guy who's still somewhat newer in the UFC. He's a big dude.
He's huge.
He was a guy.
I mean, we have him listed at like 6'5". I don't know if that's correct, but he's legit like 6'3". He was not a small,
which is really concerning. Like how's he gonna look going down in weight? Because he wasn't undersized.
No,
he's a long and lengthy guy. I mean, he's good. You got a long, lengthy guy for him versus a shorter, stockier guy in Buckley. If the weight cut doesn't affect him, he's going to have a huge size advantage. Mm-hmm. On the feet, he's a very fast, well-rounded fighter. He's got fast hands. He's accurate. He throws straight shots. He loves his straight right. He loves timing. His timing the point of contact and beating them. I mean, we've seen him recently a lot trying to time kicks. Like you throw a naked leg kick, he's coming stepping right in. He's going to eat that kick against the leg to land a big power shot. And he really does have good power, good kicking game, kicks to all areas of the body. I think his wrestling's a little overrated. I don't think is as good as people think, because his name is Ruzabayev. Like, you expect him to be, Habib and turning the corner. He's not. He kind of struggles to get the fight to the ground. But if he gets to the ground, he is a serious submission threat. He's got good back takes, good scramble ability. I think he's got like 20 subs on his record. So if he can get the fight to the ground, that's something Buckley's got to be really aware of. I'm surprised by the betting line, because I wonder, I wonder how much they're taking in the weight cut. This is a really good fight. I flip-flopped a little bit, but I'm picking Buckley. He has really grown on me. I think both fighters will have their moments. Ruzabayev, I'm worried about the weight cut and him slowing down. And that is when Buckley can take over. I think he can land good shots. I think he can win clinch battles. I think he actually might get some takedowns of his own. And he's going to have the crowd. Like, every time he lands, the crowd's going to be erupted. He's going to get the biggest chair of the night.
Mm-hmm.
I think both guys will have their moments. I think Buckley's going to win. Give me Buckley by unanimous decision.
Yeah, I am nervous about this pick because, and I think I've said this about a lot of my picks tonight, but this is one where if I'm wrong, I may just be spectacularly wrong. Like, I have been, and I'm continuing to lean Ruzabayev in this fight, but if I'm wrong, it might be Buckley by a knockout of the year contender. Just, it does make me, like, the weight cut by itself does not necessarily make me nervous, because if you go back to Ruzabayev's regional career, he may actually have more fights at welterweight than at middleweights, but they were years ago, and they were in very kind of low-level regional CIS promotions, in promotions like WEF and Pro FC and stuff. And if you look at the tape of those, like, he physically looks like a different guy. He looks like just a skinny, like a tall, lanky, skinny kid. And he seems to have more muscle in his frame now. But whatever it is that led him to think that he needed to cut to 170, because he debuted in the UFC and he trashed his first two opponents in the first round. Like, he's looked great so far. Neither Bruno Ferreira nor Cedric Dumas are great fighters, but Ruzabayev did exactly what he was supposed to do to him.
And he was bigger than both of them.
Yeah. Cedric
and Dumas is a big guy.
Dumas is a tall, rangy guy, and Ruzabayev was at least as big. And Ferreira is more of a short, muscular tank, but Ruzabayev did not give up visual size to either of them. So for him to decide that he needed to drop to 170 was interesting. And for him to decide that he could do it without issue on, I think, 6 or 7 weeks turnaround is also interesting. Because the thing is, my guess is that Joaquin Buckley wanted to be on the St. Louis card badly enough that he would have agreed to fight at 185 if he had to get on this card. Like, there's no way he was going to pass it up.
That's a good point. That's
so
a good point.
It is interesting. And it could either be him just not being realistic about his own body's aging and limitations. It could be him knowing something that we don't. If the Ruzabayev that has fought in the UFC so far, that fought in his last couple fights over in Europe and Asia, shows up, if he's not depleted by the weight cut, just the real question to me is, can he avoid Buckley's kill shots? I agree that Buckley's wrestling and grappling are underrated, and they're underrated by me. Like, it all goes back to me again. My first Joaquin Buckley fight being him versus Logan Storley. That was not a good place for his wrestling to shine. But the problem to me is, I don't think we see it. Buckley's going to be looking for the knockout here. If Buckley shoots a takedown in this fight as anything other than desperation because he's badly hurt, or just looking to close things out because Ruzabayev is badly hurt, if he does anything other than those things, like shoots for a takedown as an actual strategic decision, I will be extremely surprised. So because of that, I think that works in Ribovics's favor. It's one fewer thing for him to worry about. And then it just goes back to him being a pretty good striker himself, being really rangy, and also being a good wrestler. I agree that he's not a lights out wrestler. There aren't many lights out wrestlers that are built like him. John Jones is about it that I can think of. But he's a good wrestler, and he's a very good grappler. If he can get this thing to the ground, I think Buckley is going to be in quite a bit of trouble. Give me Ribovik, and I'm going to say he finds a way. Ribovik in the mild upset by third round submission. The St. Louis crowd isn't going to love it. It'll be interesting to see whether he stays at 170 after this. But yeah, give me Nursultan Ribovik to get it done in the mild upset. And if I'm wrong, I'm probably going to be wrong with him staring at the lights in like 2 minutes, and I might call in sick to the recap show. With that, we come to the main event of UFC St. Louis, a heavyweight clash between perennial contender Derek Lewis and rising contender Rodrigo Nascimento. Lewis, the 39-year-old Houston native, is 27-12 with one no contest overall. He's 19-10 in the UFC, a run that has seen him become the UFC's all-time leader in knockouts. It's seen him become a fan favorite, a long-time top 10 fighter, a one-time interim title challenger, but he's had a rough run of late. He has lost 5 of his last 7 fights, and he is coming into this fight off of a loss. He appeared most recently in November in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 231, where he went down to hostile territory in Brazil and dropped a unanimous decision to Jailton Almeida. So he's looking to get back into the win column, presumably looking to pad his UFC knockout record, prove that even as he pushes 40, he still has something to offer. He will try to do all of those things against Nascimento. The 31-year-old Brazilian is 11-1 with one no contest overall. He's 4-1 with one no contest since joining the UFC out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, stretching all the way back to 2022. He fought twice last year, taking a split decision over Ilir Latifi in May at UFC Fight Night Dern versus Hill, and then on the same UFC Sao Paulo card where Lewis fell to Almeida, he took a unanimous decision over Dontel Mays. Odds here are fairly close. Your favorite is minus 150, your underdog plus 120. Who are they, Keith?
Derek Lewis is the favorite.
You're correct. Derek Lewis is minus 150. Rodrigo Nascimento plus 120. I'll go first if you don't mind. The scouting report on Derek Lewis has changed over the 3-4 years that we've been doing these previews. 4 years ago, I would have said Derek Lewis is one of the greatest pure sprawl and brawlers in heavyweight history. Hard guy to take down, extremely hard guy to keep down, hits with crushing power, and deceptively athletic and deceptively smart and nuanced as a striker, despite just the big old knockout king tattoo and the ridiculous, celebration. Like that was Lewis. Just the ultimate sprawl and brawler with a little, extra sauce. Since then, more and more fighters have been able to take him down. Like they started to slow. He's been through a ton of wars. Even in his victories, he spent a lot of time losing his fights until he won. He's taken a ton of punishment. While my back is finally healthy was a, running gag for what feels like 10 years. He has had back surgeries that have taken something out of him. And so he went from being very difficult to take down and almost impossible to keep down to, Sergey Spivak basically using him as a tackling dummy. More disturbingly, he started to lose firefights of the kind that he used to reliably win. Like he used to be one of the most frightening guys in the entire UFC to stand in the phone booth with. Just he had great instincts and reflexes for slipping and rolling with punches. in close range, and he would come back with just monstrous power that his opponents couldn't deal with. He can still do that from time to time. I starched Marcos Rogerio de Lima less than a year ago, but increasingly, Tai Tuivasa stood toe-to-toe with him, took his best shots, put him down. Sergey Pavlovich stood toe-to-toe with him, didn't even really take his best shots, just slipped and parried his best shots and plunked him. So Nascimento is the kind of guy that Lewis would have been tailor-made to thrash a couple of years ago. It feels a lot closer now, but Rodrigo Nascimento has never fought anybody on the same level as even the version of Derek Lewis we have right now. Like, you can make a pretty good argument that his best win in the UFC, and his best win period, is like Ilir Latifi. He's beaten Don'Tale Mayes twice, but yeah, without looking, I would guess that Nascimento does not have any wins over anybody that's over 500 in the UFC. And when Chris Daukaus found Nascimento's chin, he put him out fast and easy. And Daukaus, even at his very best during that little flash, was at best a very, very poor man's Derek Lewis. Like, yeah, this is a fight that would have been tailor-made for Lewis to just style on him. It's a little more concerning now. Like, Nascimento is a huge guy, and kind of like Lewis, surprisingly nimble on his feet for as gigantic as he is, but he's not Gable Steveson on the feet. He's not even like Surreal Gone, in terms of being that big and able to move that fast. He's still a little lumbering. And while he's at his best as kind of a top position bully, he's had a tough time getting to those positions against lesser fighters than Lewis. Nascimento is on a good run. Like, he's like 4-1 in the UFC. He's on a nice little unbeaten streak. But I think he might be the highest ranked guy, or the guy with the most momentum in the division right now, that I feel this comfortable taking Lewis over. Even if Nascimento is able to get Lewis down, I think Lewis is probably going to be able to get back up, because Nascimento's whole thing will be to try to pass to side control, try to set up an arm triangle, or try to grab, a far side Kimura. Those are all things that the Derek Lewis sit up and get up game, bottom game, seems to work well against. And if Nascimento has trouble getting Lewis down, just a big dude lumbering into range with his chin in the air, which is what this guy is, I think we're going to get kind of like we got in the Marcos Rogerio de Lima fight last year. We're going to get one more great hurrah in the twilight of Derek Lewis's career. I think Lewis lamps this guy in the first round, and it doesn't mean that Lewis is back. It doesn't mean that he's going to make his way back to another title shot. Like, it makes me sad to say it, but I could very easily see Lewis being out of the UFC before his 40th birthday. Like, I could see him beating Nascimento and then losing 2 more fights this year or something like that. But this should be like one last great hurrah. Look for Lewis to drive the crowd wild, catch Nascimento coming in with just like a crushing uppercut like he did to Blades, or just teeing off on the fence with a shockingly fast combo like he did Chris Daukaus. Nascimento goes down. Lewis does his weird worm dance, takes his pants off, says something outrageous, and we go home.
Yeah. Yeah, Derek Lewis. I mean, who knows with this guy? I mean, he's a very athletic heavyweight. I mean, he's the king of being patient and waiting, and then suddenly blitzing in with legendary power. I mean, obviously, he has the most knockouts in UFC history. I've said this a million times about Derek Lewis. He doesn't have to land, clean. He can just hit a grazing shot. Though he is, I've said this about him a lot too, he's more accurate than he gets credited. He's good at measuring his foes and picking up their timing. Perfect examples like Curtis Blades. He lulls and then he explodes. He throws high kicks. He throws flying knees. He has a better gas tank than people give him credit for. he is a guy that he constantly looks like he's tired, but he doesn't fight tired. I mean, we've seen many, many times him coming from behind and winning fights late in fights. I mean, the Alio Latifi fight, it's kind of getting a little further in the rearview mirror, but that's the one where he's in this back and forth grueling battle, and it was his cardio that helped him win a fight. Now, the Tuivasa knockout is concerning. He used to have this rock hard chin, and we've seen him recently knocked out several times. The Pavlovich, not so much. I mean, Pavlovich, he connects on anybody. He's knocking you out. So now you could argue the timing, the speed might be something like that. He got hit with those, that his reaction at time might be an issue. Okay, like I'm okay with that. But so far as his chin, I'm not super concerned. Now he's not a very good wrestler. He has used his size and got on top of guys and unleashed some of the scariest, meanest ground and pound you'll ever see. Defensively, that's the concern. I mean, we saw him get taken down by Sergey Spivak and just quickly stop. Looked like he had no motivation, didn't want to be there. Now, on the flip side, while he got dominated against Gelton Almeida, he didn't get subbed by him. He showed some defense in that. So that's something to be positive.
He put up enough of a fight in that fight that most people kind of thought Almeida's stock took a hit.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. And some people think his stock took a hit because a lot of people think that Almeida was like a top 3, top 5 guy, could be a future champion, and a lot of people think Lewis is shot. Yeah,
but like I've rarely seen a fighter get shit on so hard for winning 50-45 as Almeida did against Lewis.
Yeah,
and a lot of it was just due to Lewis being motivated.
Against a ranked guy who's been as successful as Derek Lewis has. I think it's somewhere in between. While Derek Lewis isn't the fighter he once was, he's not completely shot. While Almeida might not be the favorite to win the title, that's what a lot of people believe. Like a lot of people thought he was like the favorite. This is the next guy. He's not. His stock shouldn't have gone down either. Like he's still a really serious threat in the division. Now, obviously, the Curtis Blades knockout changes some of that, but I'm talking about that night. Nascimento. I mean, we get off track, but Nascimento. I mean, for a guy who's fighting in the main event and fought a lot in the UFC, I don't have a lot of notes on him because I mean he's a southpaw. He's pretty athletic. He marches forward. He likes to throw down the pocket, throw big shots. He throws tight shots down the pipe. His right hook is a good shot. He throws a lot of kicks. He's got a quick high kick, but he has defensive issues. One is he keeps his chin really high. He has like this kind of tall man's defense. When he grapples, he's looking to get inside, looking for chip takedowns. He will shoot from distance, though. Got good ground and pound. He's got some slick submissions, especially for heavyweight. He's got 6 subs on his record. But a lot of things, the reason why I don't have that many notes, so it's a lot of things he's done has been done against really low level UFC talent. This is a massive step in competition, in my opinion. Even I don't want to say shot. I don't think Derek Lewis shot, but even a declining Derek Lewis is still a huge step up compared to, Don'Tale Mayes and Tanner
Don'Tale Mayes again. And
Don'Tale twice and Tanner Bozer and guys like that. So there's a lot of question marks. Is Lewis motivated? I don't know. Is Lewis shot? I don't know. Is the injuries finally taking his toll? I don't know. I'll say this. Derek Lewis loves the crowd. He loves being the center of attention. This isn't in the Apex. This is in a crowd that's going to be rocking for him. I think that helps in the motivation. I'm still confident that Derek Lewis is better than Nascimento. I'm picking him here. Could Nascimento land a big looping shot and knock Derek Lewis out? Of course. Could he get a takedown and control him? I'm not sold on Nascimento's ground game. Like, I don't think he's Curtis Blades out there. I don't think he's Almeida out there. And Almeida couldn't finish Lewis. I think Lewis is gonna. I think they're gonna get a moment. They're gonna throw it in the pocket, and Nascimento is just too hittable, and Lewis just hits too hard. I say Lewis catches him with a big shot, knocks him out. I'm with you. I think he does it early. I think it's first round. I think he gets that, and I think it's gonna be epic. I think Derek Lewis, like you said, does that like predator worm thing, whatever you say, you want to say. The Bears are flying, people are going crazy. People screaming, "My balls is hot," and isn't just extending his record of UFC knockouts. Give me Derek Lewis by first round knockout.
And there you have it, the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 56, Lewis versus Nascimento. I have been Ben. He has been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring as good a blend of in-depth analysis and occasional side tangents as you'll find anywhere in this industry. Please do like, subscribe, drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We love to hear from you there. We're good about responding. We picked a good number of upsets. We had 3 unanimous upset picks on this card. I think that might be a record for us. If you think we're way off base on any of those, or we missed any other low-hanging fruit, let us know, because if you're right, we will definitely give you all of the credit you deserve on the recap. And that's where you should join us. We will be live on the Sherdog YouTube page right after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We will talk about all 13 of these fights, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and talking with you. The live chat is open that whole time, so we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we would love you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.
To the sea. Make your bed of fairy tales while you're